What's the worst case you've seen of someone trying to play the victim when it was all their own fault? Local business owner slash friend asked a lot of his regular customers to invest in his new business in Atlanta by buying shares. I bought in, knowing he wouldn't break even for at least 3 years, but that he could sell religion to the Pope. He had losses for 2 years, break even at 3 as predicted. 4 years in, he closes the Atlanta store and opens in another town, but this time he's doing it all with his own money. Bull crap. He's doing it with the inventory and proceeds from the Atlanta store. Even has a shiny new house, cars, the works for his new venture. He's shocked to the core and hurt, I tell you, hurt and disappointed when all the shareholders took him to court. Edit. Our lawsuit basically never got off the taxiway, and as one of the good Redditors below mentioned, it soon looked like the cost of going through the courts would quickly outpace our losses. People started dropping off and it fell apart. The original store and the Atlanta store were closed. Those bridges he well and truly burned. The final store had changed names, but appears to be going strong. No way in hell will I name the business. I don't doubt for a second that while we smaller potato investors weren't ready for a long court fight, the owner would have no qualms about bringing a defamation suit against me in a heartbeat. Sometimes karma is just asleep at the wheel, and you have to accept it. Story 2. I was in a crowded parking lot, driving around looking for a space. There was one car ahead of me. The car ahead of me stopped, so I stopped as well. I'm not sure why he stopped because there were no empty spaces and no one was pulling out, but whatever. Then, before I even had time to react, her reverse lights came on and she came flying backwards towards me. I didn't even have time to honk. She slammed into the front of my car, got out of her car, and started screaming that I hit her. When officers arrived, she was crying and shaking and complaining that her neck hurt, and cursing me for slamming into the back of her car. Thankfully, 2 people had been walking through the parking lot when this occurred and told the officer what really happened. Later, the driver of the car that hit me tried to tell her insurance company that I knew the witnesses and that's why they lied. I didn't know the witnesses, by the way. At any rate, if the witness hadn't stuck around to give statements, I'd have been screwed. So this sounds like a classic case of insurance fraud where people force accidents in which the other person that they hit would be deemed at fault legally in order to make out on a pretty big settlement. And obviously they're going to fake injuries, this lady saying her neck hurts and all that. That's why it's important, folks, to have a dash cam at all times. They're cheap, they're inexpensive, they're easy to install, and that way when some jerkface tries to get you caught up in a scam like this, you have video evidence and you can shut it down ASAP. Moving on. Story 3. Sometimes my children ask me why they've met my mother but never met my father. I tell them he died a long time ago when I was a kid. In reality, my dad used to be an abusive drunk, and my mother had to kick him out because he used to beat on us kids. We used to spend weekends at his new house, but around the time I turned 10, he told my mother to stop dropping us off and gave her a shoebox full of all the pictures he had of us. We tried calling him on holidays every now and again, but he finally just told us to stop contacting him altogether. Last year, my mother passed away, and he decided to reach out to me and express he had changed and wanted to make things up to me. I told him it was okay. I filled him in on how I was doing in life and sent him pictures of my children, but I expressed I was already a man and don't need a father anymore. But he was forgiven for the 20-year absence. He then proceeded to tell me that I'm horrible for pushing him away and abandoning him, that he was dying and just wanted to fix things. So I just explained to him it's already forgiven, but he abandoned me and I had no time for his foolishness. I wish things would have been different, but he's too much of a bad influence to allow in my children's lives. Story 4. An employee was being fired for a multitude of infractions at a coffee shop. He had been caught by management calling customers things like dumbass and stupid F under his breath, and several customers had also reported the behavior. He was constantly late or would leave early or beg others to cover his shift. Instead of restocking or cleaning the area during downtimes, he would take out his drumsticks and practice, which annoyed the other employees and customers. During inventory counts, we noticed whole pallets of sandwiches or baked goods were missing, as well as bottled drinks, etc. We were mysteriously out of huge 5-pound bags of espresso roast. The numbers were not adding up. He was subsequently fired after being caught bad-mouthing a customer while a visiting manager was also in the cafe. The guy didn't know it. The guy blamed all the issues on everyone else. Late to work turned into I missed the bus or my roommate forgot to wake me up in time. Leaving early turned into, well, I got a call for a gig / there's a concert I wanted to see. Food missing turned into I didn't have money to eat and it's the company's responsibility to ensure I'm fed while on the clock. Calling customers names turned into, they misunderstood me. Management said, what part of calling a customer a dumb F is a misunderstanding? Followed by, not my fault they're so sensitive. All this dude's problems were blamed on everyone else, and all his issues and situations in life were blamed on everyone else. Us employees stopped inviting him out because at bars he would order drinks and tell the bartender one of us was covering and skip out or leave rapidly before the check was presented to us. He would also walk around tables when people got up to dance or talk in a group and guzzle down their drinks. He was an all-over crappy person. Found out after he was fired from our store, he was hired by a Starbucks in the mall, who failed to call for a reference or check even though our store was listed as a previous place of employment. He was caught stealing money and food from there too. Edit. I wanted to add that this was our worst employee. We had another guy who worked his ass off but had a generally bad demeanor, but he was a solid hard worker. One day he sat down and watched the drummer dude spout his mouth off and treat customers like crap, and turned to me and said, I hope to God I don't sound or act like that. Just from watching this one guy, the other employee became a model customer service employee almost overnight. Also, we had another guy there. He went by some weird animal name instead of his real name. He was sent home for showing up drunk several times and was let go after management found he snuck a bottle of vodka in and was adding it to girls' drinks during the late shift. Story 5. My BIL, wife's brother. Everything is terrible in his life because everyone conspires to be mean to him. All his drug problems are other people's fault. The government never could have taken his kid from him because he's a good father. When his disabled mother got custody of his kid and then let him move in with them, she made up all those stories about him hitting her and the kid. When the government, both APS and CPS, told us we had to protect them from him, we had no right to take his kid, that he hadn't had custody of for years. He lives off disability for back problems he's had since getting a beatdown for running his mouth at the wrong people, despite the fact his doctors tell him he doesn't need a wheelchair and can work. It's our fault he can't pay his bills, even though he's still living in his mother's house rent-free, and that surely has nothing to do with the fact that he blows his disability check on drugs and junk food as soon as he gets it. In his mind, we abandoned him to die and are horrible people for not letting him live with us, despite the fact that the government literally put his mother and kid in our care to keep them safe from him. He came up with a scheme where he called 911 to be taken to the local hospital. When he got there, he told them he was dying because he was wheelchair-bound and abandoned in a squalid house. The house became squalid after the mother and kid were removed because he refused to clean and had a dog he never let outside. He actually got Adult Protective Services to call us and tell us we had to take care of him and fix up the house. By the way, we live 250 miles away in a different state. We explained the history and gave them the names of the caseworkers for his mother and son, who know him well. APS confirmed what we told them. When APS told him we didn't agree to let him live with us, he demanded they file a court order to force us to allow him to live in our home. APS told him that wasn't actually a thing that could happen, so he started screaming profanities at everyone in the hospital. She called us from the hospital. We heard him screaming. When the doctors told him, again, he didn't need a wheelchair, he screamed at them. They discharged him, but he refused to leave on his own, so they sent him home in an ambulance. He refused to get out, so they wound up driving him back to the hospital and leaving him on a gurney in the ER waiting room. After 8 hours, when he still refused to leave, they had security drag him out and dump him in the parking lot. A few weeks later, he's calling us, begging us to pay his bills, and goes off again on how we had no right to take his kid from him. And we're terrible people because we refuse to acknowledge what a good father he is. He lives in the rural South. Do you know what it takes for CPS to take your kid in a poor county in the South? We're talking immediate danger to life. Not only did they do that, and then a judge permanently took away his custody, but then they came back and said the kid and his mother weren't safe in the same house as him, and we stole his kid. I raised my kids. They've graduated and are adults. I have no desire to raise another kid, let alone one who has significant emotional issues from being abused. But guess what? I am, because I'm not a total piece of crap, and I can't turn my back on them. But in my brother-in-law's eyes, this is all a vast conspiracy to spite him. Story 6. I'm so glad when I see these questions because I can talk about my sister. She's always been a loose cannon, creates chaos wherever she goes, constantly playing the victim, thinks the world owes her everything. Anyways, one day she calls my mom claiming the place she was staying in was a cult. Weird, right? But we don't ask questions. Mistake. She also claims that she was SA'd by someone and he's following her. Okay, who's gonna tell anyone that's not true? She also claims that she's been watching by some weird government agency. What even? Anyways, after all of this, my mom says she can stay with us temporarily. Sister says maximum 2 weeks. Okay. For reference, my mom and I were living in an apartment that had a total of 5 rooms. Kitchen, small random area that was 10 by 10, bathroom, my room, which was the living room, and my mom's room. So basically we had no space. Also, my mom has no money at all. She has just enough for rent and food, but that's with me chipping in some every now and then. But she is family, so I don't mind sharing my room with my sister for 2 weeks. She gets there and right away she has no money. But she wants a job where she has to take the turnpike to a highly populated city. So my mom gives her her change jar for tolls only. Should have been about $5 a day. My sister uses 80% of my mom's change jar within a month's time. She was using it for gas, bills, food, anything and everything. But whatever, right? Crappy, but whatever. Nothing to call the constable over. Then she says, I haven't found a place to live. I need 2 more weeks. Okay, fine. But you need to start helping us pay bills and such. She has a fit, freaks out, says the entire family hates her. Whatever. Perhaps she's just being dramatic. Mom gives her leeway on the bills until sister feels more financially sound. Then my stepdad unexpectedly dies. My sister didn't even like my stepdad, so she's basically like, whatever, he's dead. And my mom is obviously torn. Her effing best friend died. So my sister goes into my mom's room 2 days after he passed away and says, Mom, you should go into a mental hospital. You're having a psychotic break. Excuse me? She said this because my mom had been crying since she found out he died. Obviously. Who the F wouldn't? Then, my sister invites her children to come and live with us. Her 12 and 9-year-old daughter and son. Where are we going to put them? Who's going to pay for them? She didn't even ask. Then she posted something on Instagram and it had a sexual reference. Me, being the youngest, commented, LOL, ew, like I always do whenever my siblings make comments about sex. It's kind of a fun thing between us because my siblings laugh and I laugh and it lightens whatever mood. She starts acting really nasty to me, telling me my niece and nephew hate being there because of me. They don't like me. I'm making mom's life hard, etc. All because of my comment. Eventually, all hell breaks loose and sister is screaming and fighting with my mom, telling her the nastiest stuff, refusing to leave, literally going crazy, hitting stuff, throwing stuff, threatening self-unaliving, saying everyone hates her, telling my mom she was the cause of my sister's hard life. Like, what? All this stuff that is too long to write on a Reddit post. So my mom says, you've been here for 2 months and haven't helped with bills. You have to go. She refuses. She calls the cops, claiming we're unlawfully trying to evict her. What? Anyways, so my mom finally just told the landlord she couldn't stay there because of my stepdad's passing and that she was leaving. We all came, packed up mom's stuff, and left. I don't know where she went after that, but I haven't talked to her since. She still claims the family hates her because of me and my mom. She claims we didn't help her. She claims that the house fell apart because of me. She claims we all should have done more for her. She claims we don't love her and XYZ is why. She's the crappiest version of human I've ever come into contact with. Edit. Thank you everyone for the responses. To answer some questions and clear things up. My mom has been a psych nurse for over 40 plus years and she also thinks my sister has BPD. My sister will not seek treatment. My mom got my sister to go to therapy like 3 times and my sister left and said that the therapist was trying to make her seem crazy. My stepdad lived a couple states away. He went to go be with his adult children because they were in bad spots. Drugs, poverty, etc. He died in July via heart attack. He was supposed to move back in with us in August. It's my sister that I don't talk to anymore. My mother and I have a very strong bond. I wouldn't trade her for the entire world. My sister believed the place she was living in prior was a cult because the people tried to make her go to church on Sundays. When we told her that doesn't make them a cult, she freaked out and said that we didn't care about her. We weren't there with her to experience them, etc. There was nothing we could really say to her about it then. She shut down the whole conversation. We never got answers to her believed government stalker. She would usually babble until we were totally lost in her story. Story 7. Not the worst case I've had experience with, but when I kicked my abusive ex out of my house, he started playing the homeless victim card bad. Understand, when I kicked him out, it had been 10 months after we broke up. He strong-armed me into letting him live with me when I got a better place, and he got kicked out of his friend's house. I was the only one working. He refused to watch our child while I was at work. He would get aggressive and violent if I even talked to another guy, and there were multiple cases of my best friend and only ally would have to basically kidnap me to get me away from him and keep me safe. Yeah, it was all just a effed up mess. But he started telling everyone I was this crazy, horrible person, how I kept him from seeing our daughter, and how I was, quote, being a female dog because I was jealous. For years afterwards, everyone believed him, and I lost every friend I had. Thankfully, this story got a happy ending. It's been years since this happened, and now I'm in a healthy, happy, and safe environment. I met and married an amazing human being who held my hand and had my back when I started going to therapy to heal the wounds that were left, and is the father of my youngest. My daughter is now 9 and is an amazingly sweet and strong girl, and I have an amazing group of friends who are the best support team no one could ask for. Story 8. I was drugged and SA'd by one of my religious leaders at about 20, and to help me cope with it, I started seeing a therapist and made a dedicated journal to all these dark thoughts, where instead of trying to tell myself, I'm okay, life's okay, yep, didn't happen, I'm fine, I could write all the deepest, darkest crap my brain was thinking. I did not tell my wife about my event, but she has a tendency of being snoopy. Constantly woke up to her about 2 to 3 a.m. going through my phone. So I tell her about the journal. That is one thing under no circumstances she can read. That it is extremely personal, and if she wishes to read it at some point, she needs to talk to me about it, and I will decide if I feel it's necessary or beneficial. Of course, one day she comes out and says she read it. The excuse was terrible, and she's mad at me that I didn't tell her sooner. That, as my wife, I should be comfortable telling her anything and everything. As the following weeks go by, I'm very angry with her, and she remains adamant that it was my fault because I didn't tell her sooner and that I should change my stance on things I tell her. A few months go by and I'm still upset. Our relationship is still rocky, and she says, "Oh wow, that? I thought you were over that by now." And I reply back with, "No, of course I'm still upset you betrayed my trust." To which she responds, "Oh, I thought you were over the journal thing a while ago. I thought you'd be over your event by now with the therapy you've been doing." This female dog was as insensitive as it gets. Needless to say, she's now my ex-wife. Okay, so 2 trains of thought here, kind of playing devil's advocate. Yes, it is definitely a violation of trust if you've expressed that under no circumstances you want that journal read and she did it anyway. That's kind of messed up. But also at the same time, it's like, what's the point of marrying someone if you're going to be keeping secrets from each other? This is something that should have been addressed maybe while y'all were still going out, and not like after you're married and united in holy matrimony, till death do you part and all of that. So it's like, I don't know, I feel like the cart got put before the horse in that relationship without knowing all the details, but yeah, it's kind of a weird situation. Story 9. This girl accused a teacher who had been there for over 40 years of SA right before her entrance exam. It was a really good private school, so you needed to take a test to be considered for admission. The accusations were investigated and were found completely unfounded almost immediately. I don't know what this girl was thinking. Like, maybe she thought it was a way for her to get some leverage and improve her chances of getting in or something. On top of that, the actions of the school were even worse. They kept him in the dark for 2 months after the investigation was completed and were refusing to allow him back because of their insurance. Then a campaign was launched by a bunch of alums, and he finally got back to teaching, until his death a few years ago. He was a great guy, too. I had him for a political theory class, and he was really nice. He and his wife, aside from having children of their own, took in foster kids all the time, and he did a lot of other volunteer work. Sucks he had to go through all that because some teenage girl lied. Story 10. Oh boy, it's like you knew I'd be answering this question. There was this guy I'll call Chappie, because it sounds close enough to a nickname I gave him, which eventually became how everyone knew him. He got himself a girlfriend he gaslighted all the time. He was also a close friend of mine and many other guys. Chappie would always play the victim. Chappie would always guilt trip. Chappie would always make you arrange your life around his wishes. Well, he made his girlfriend cry 3 times a week, then come to me asking what he did wrong. If I called him out, he'd make excuses. He never accepted his wrongdoings. One day, I was walking my dog and in a particularly foul mood. Chappie asked me to play a video game on a group chat we were in. I left him on red. So did other guys in the group. Oh boy, what a big mistake. Chappie started throwing passive-aggressive crap, all because we didn't reply to him in 4 minutes. 4 effing minutes. I got tired of his crap. He had been doing this for the past month, and I woke up grumpy. I snapped. I called him out. He played the victim. Another friend called him out and backed me up. Chappie came to us via private message, threatening my friend and guilt-tripping me. I gave him cold replies. My friend wished him good luck. I blocked him, and so did my friend. Chappie lived in a different country, so of course he couldn't come and find me. His girlfriend lives in the same country I do, and therefore a different country from Chappie. They were an LDR. I blocked Chappie and left him, essentially severing any chance of him talking to me without going through a friend. 4 days later, I come to find out that what I did to Chappie, his girlfriend did too. He woke up on their 9-month anniversary date completely ghosted. The guy played the victim, but nobody really supported him. They all figured out that the way he was treating us, his friends, was the same way he treated his, now ex-girlfriend. He played the victim and cried wolf a lot. Now, nobody wanted to be with him when he really needed it. Moral of the story, don't be an idiot. You don't realize how quickly you can lose everything for being one. Story 11. Ex-husband never got a job until I literally got him one. When I got out of the military, he wanted to move to a particular town he used to live and work in, despite his current employment and me getting a really good job offer as a civilian on base. We agreed that he'd get his prior job back. He assured me he was cool with the manager, and I'd use my GI Bill to finish school and raise our son, since I'd missed his first steps being in the military. 10 months later, I've had to get a job and run through my savings, and I find out from one of my best friends, whose ex-husband had worked with at the shop he was assured to get, that my ex knew the manager didn't work there anymore and wasn't going to get his old job back. So I'd given up a good-paying job for a crappy one, used up my savings, etc. I told my ex that I wanted a divorce in November, after he forgot my birthday, and moved out mid-December. Mind you, I'd paid out my lease until it ran out at the end of January on the condition that he mind our dogs because I couldn't afford both apartments, and a pet deposit. All I said when I left was, I wanted him to get a job and be a dad. Those were literally the only 2 conditions I ever put on us working things out. Anywho, get the dogs back and they're malnourished, and X has told everyone that I was an evil female dog for leaving him high and dry. This was in 2013-ish, and eventually every one of his friends has kicked him out for not getting a job. He does have a job now and likes to brag about things he and his girlfriend do and buy. I'm not mad at his girlfriend, but I feel sorry for her because I know for a fact he cheated on her multiple times, and for the first few years of their relationship, he chose her over our child. As in, he disappeared for 2 years and blamed me for that as well, when I begged him over and over to be a dad. So when he says I'm a female dog and only sees him as a source of child support, he's not wrong. Story 12. My sister with every single relationship. Oh, you don't know why he dumped you? Maybe it's 'cause he was married and your boss and you were dating someone at the time. Your fiancé is controlling and cruel. That's why you broke up? Maybe. Or maybe it's all your friends pouring poison in your ears and the married guy you're shagging. Her fiancé was the nicest guy. She attacked him. Last time I saw him, he had claw marks down his face because of her. You don't understand why you're being used for sex? Is it maybe because you just sleep with everyone within hours of meeting them, and if you somehow end up dating them, go total psycho female dog on them? Hard to breathe? Bad teeth? Maybe it's because you started smoking to look cool. You don't have bipolar. You don't have depression. Both can be explained by the fact that you're a hyper-emotional, crazy female dog who's screaming at everyone 1 minute, then crying because you got dumped the next. And if you don't ever wear condoms, it's your own damn fault you got the clap, dumbass. She's a diva and a drama queen. The worst combination. Okay, tell us how you really feel about your sister. Holy rant. That was, I'm sure, pretty cathartic to put into words. Story 13. I manage an outpatient drug and alcohol education/treatment center. We're licensed with the state so that anyone who gets a DWI/DUI has to go through an evaluation process and complete some form of the education/treatment program dependent on that evaluation, in order to get their license reinstated or satisfy a probation requirement. Every state has its own version of this for alcohol or drug-related driving offenses. Everyone has to do it, and no one is exempt or special, regardless of whether they won or lost their criminal case in court. There are those who very obviously made the mistake of driving after a couple glasses of wine, had a BAC just over the legal limit, they realize they effed up and they usually end up in the lowest level. They get it done, no complaints, but every single day I come across at least one person who blames the state for having to do the program. They call it a racket, a money scheme, a waste of their time, complain about having to go through it, etc., and they treat me like crap in the process as if I make the rules. Without fail, these are always the people who've had multiple DWI/DUIs, have drug/alcohol addictions, and many of them have concurrent charges of vehicular manslaughter or accidents with injuries. These effers who walk through my doors who've literally killed or injured someone because of intoxicated driving, avoided jail, and have to go through 6 weeks of outpatient treatment, complaining about having to do it, piss me off to no end. I used to keep my mouth shut, but I've experienced so many of these perpetual victim types that when they start their bickering, I remind them of the real reason they're in my office. Story 14. My roommate kicked himself out of my condo. I didn't know this before he moved in, but he turned out to be a pathological liar and attention/pity seeker. He fabricated and gossiped all kinds of stories that were easily proven false, and then he'd backpedal and lash out if caught. I was super uncomfortable with it and privately started making mental plans to give him his 30 days notice at the end of his lease, 4 months away, but hadn't told anyone. Well, one day I get some text messages from some mutual colleagues asking if it was true that I was kicking him out today, and I tell him that this was the first I was hearing of it. Turned out that roughly after the 3rd or 4th time that I caught the roommate in a major lie, he noticed that I wasn't as chummy with him anymore, and he started spreading a rumor that I had hated him now and that I was going to kick him out on his ass and make him homeless. He went crying to all the prettiest ladies of the gossip mill at work about how he was getting kicked out tonight, and the rumor traveled quickly in a circle back around, and he got tons of attention. So that night, he comes home from drinks with his gossip entourage and starts yelling at me about how he'd heard that I'm evicting him and demands how to know if the rumor was true that I was going to kick him out tonight. I told him, nope, I had no idea what he was talking about. He starts ranting and raving about how gossip gets around and continues accusing me. I tell him point blank that I don't know what he's talking about because I wasn't planning on evicting him today and I had never talked to anyone about evicting him. But I was upfront about my intention to give him notice at the end of his lease. He starts yelling, "What date?" and then cuts me off and gives himself 30 days notice from today and starts accusing me of kicking him out before the holidays. Then he stormed off and updated his whole gossip train that he had been kicked out tonight and that the rumors were all true. The next day, he found a friend's couch to sleep on and another room to rent by the end of the week, and upped the gossip to, "Billy hates me so much, they kicked me out onto the street that night." So he turned his own rumor that he created about himself into a quasi-reality. He did leave my home that day, but not on my doing. My home and my life are 1,000 times more peaceful now that he is gone. Story 15. I work at a bottle shop, liquor store/alcohol vendor. The drinking age in Australia is 18 plus, and both the offender and the vendor can be fined if found selling or supplying alcohol to an underage person in public. The other night, a car pulled up and an older man and a younger woman came inside. The older man goes to buy wine and the younger man buys cruisers, vodka. The younger man gets to the counter and I ask him for ID, to which he responds, "Oh, sorry, it's in the car," and leaves to go get it. I see him get halfway to the car, 180, and come back in and says, "I don't have one." I tell the young man that I'm unable to sell him alcohol, to which made him go full deer in headlights. His father arrives and says, "Don't worry, they're not for him. I'll purchase them." To which I inform him that due to our store policy, I can't sell either of them since I have reason to believe that the sale could end in secondhand supply, i.e., I believe you're buying alcohol for someone underage. However, there's no law against those under 18 drinking at a private residence in Australia under permission of a parent or guardian. So I attempt to inform the two that there's a second bottle shop literally in the same building right around the corner and that the older man can just go in and buy what the younger man wanted without revealing his presence, therefore removing reason to believe secondhand sale, and they would be on their merry way. Instead, the two double down on their efforts. The older man begins flaring up and refuses to give me a moment to breathe, let alone explain the secondhand sale law, constantly trying to poke holes in my case and abusing me, which then opens up the second reason to refuse service, due to the abuse/aggressive behavior. They finally leave, saying the most classic line, "If you're from Australia and have met any superwogs, unbelievable," and storm out. As a last-ditch effort to help, as I like to try to be above emotional provocation, I try to catch the under 18-year-old's attention as quickly as I can and explain how they can get alcohol without refusal of service, to which he forefinger points at me, shouts midway through my explanation, "This will resolve the problem," to which I pause and roll my eyes and tell him to get out. Story 16. Not really a worst case, although I must admit I can't remember many other cases, but my mom loves playing the victim. Examples. When dinner is ready, my mom always gets to the table later than the rest. Sometimes she's checking her blood sugar, other times something else. Me and my dad then have two choices. Either wait until my mom is at the table as well and start the dinner with the three of us, or fill our plates and start eating without my mom. No matter which of the two options we go for, we make the wrong one. Either it's, "What are you waiting for me for? You're both grown-ups. You don't need me to supervise you." Or, "No one ever waits for me in this household. Guess I won't eat." Followed by her waiting until me and my dad are done eating, and then she'll eat alone, naturally complaining that we don't allow her to eat hot food and we make her eat cold food. She refuses to ever ask for help with whatever, and then complain that no one ever helps her. And when we offer to help, she'll just ignore us or says something like, "No, not like this." I could go on and list a dozen more examples, but you get the idea. It was never that bad, but it has gotten way worse since she became wheelchair-bound. She tried going to see a psychologist, but stopped going after a while. Anytime she was offered to help, she either refused or stopped going after a couple of sessions. Story 17. At my old job, we had a guy whose wife worked for the same company but in a different department. She was always coming around and meddling in his business. She always had an opinion of what was going on and was perpetually displeased by everything we did. Everything was a perceived attack on her husband, and she was constantly criticizing us for things that she had no idea about. Even sending him to break 5 minutes late because we got busy would be enough to be put on her crap list. She was frequently late to her own area because she'd just hang around and watch us from a distance. She was taken to HR several times for this behavior. A couple years ago, they were eating lunch together in the employee break area. She got all worked up over something and hit him. Several people saw it and reported it. Later that day, she was pulled aside by security and HR about it. She not only denied it, despite there being several dozen witnesses, but she gave them a false name for herself, thinking they wouldn't know any better. She was fired on the spot. Now she goes around posting all over social media and review sites, claiming that she was fired for having a disability. I've seen so many weird, completely fabricated stories from all over Facebook about why she was fired. She goes on and on about how the company actively discriminates against employees with disabilities. She eventually convinced her husband to quit. He had a severe limp at the time, and now he's in a wheelchair. I have a feeling she has something to do with that, and she probably still plays the victim. Story 18. Man, this is still raw. I'm literally at Rhodes Airport right now. Anyways, background. My gran and my dad don't talk. He's technically my stepdad. He's an a-hole and effed her over, allegedly, and he doesn't bother keeping in touch. I've gotten along with her well, so I try to make up the disappointment. She has crappy pension. My aunt, whose house she lives in, doesn't treat her particularly well. Last year, in October, Grandpa died, so I planned a trip over. I live in NZ, Gran in EU. Gran loves the sea and has psoriasis, which apparently lessens with seawater. So I booked us a week-long trip to Greece. I've never been, and she's holidayed around the Mediterranean in the past, so I asked if she has a preference, etc. She said she didn't mind, as long as the beach is nearby, and the holiday is all-inclusive, so food and drink fully provided. I found a trip and ran it by her. She was happy, so I booked it. It cost me almost $2,000 in New Zealand for us. For reference, my return flights from NZ were under $1,500. I've worked my ass off and saved all year. I worked 3 jobs, 1 full-time, 1 part-time, and 1 casual. We got here on Friday last week. There were some bumps along the way. Airport changed gates, so we walked all across a terminal and back. Gran has bad knees, so that was a bit rough, but she refuses a cane, and God forbid I suggest getting assistance. We get there, and despite me requesting a ground floor room, we get first floor, partially due to her walking so slow. We were the last in the hotel, and while they would happily swap us, there were no rooms available. She tries to bribe the receptionist by sliding him €2. I could die of shame. He tells me to speak to the morning receptionist that she might be able to get us another room. In the morning, the receptionist offers to look, but by then, Gran unpacked all her crap and did not want to move. Prior to coming here, I was very open about the fact that I have no intention to lie on the beach all day. I wanted to explore Rhodos. No problem. Saturday, I go for a wander, come back for lunch. Gran complains. Beach is rocky and not sandy, which was in the description, and she said she did not mind. It's the west coast of Rhodos. Too windy. She complains, understandably. I offer to rent a car, so we go to the east coast. Sandy, windless beaches. She dislikes the idea due to the cost, €50 per day. I tell her not to worry. To me, that's a small amount compared to the entire cost of the trip. And if she can't go to the beach, what's the point of being here? So Monday we drive to the east. Nice beaches. I buy her lunch. We bring some girls she befriended. Each beach she has something she doesn't like, but at least she can and does swim. Tuesday, I and the girls are on a boat trip we prepaid. Gran couldn't because of her knees. She's at poolside all day and befriends more people. Wednesday, I organize a car again. She gets pissed at me over something trivial and claims she's not going anywhere. I think, effing great, €50 wasted. I hold my tongue, she gets over it. We go east, along with 3 of her new mates. We go to Sampica Beach. Gorgeous. Everything one could wish for. None of her friends have any desire to leave the beach. I leave them to go up to the hill to Sampica Church. So worth the 300 steep stairs. Then I drive to Lindos. As I stop in Lindos and buy apples that Gran requested, I have a missed call. They want to know how far away I am. I don't want to leave them stranded, so I come straight back. They all claim I need not have. Gran insists we stop on the way. She buys apples, gives her friend the apples I bought her. She's relatively pleasant in the evening. By the morning, she's ignoring me. I let her know that I'm going to Rhodos. She gives 0 Fs. I have a great day. I come back and the girls are interested in what I was up to. Gran gives 0 ducks. She's borderline hostile, tells me that I'm not special. The cute waiter at the place I had lunch gave me dessert on the house. She says it's standard. I ask her if she wants me to grab her some watermelon. Food is buffet style, and I've been fetching her drinks and putting plates away all week. She responds that she's a self-sufficient adult and can do it herself. Friday morning ignoring continues. She sits with her new mates, so I go to Lindos, have a fabulous day, and return. She ignores me or throws nasty remarks at me, like when we take a group photo and I joke to one of the girls that I want to hide my belly behind her. Gran deadpan says, "Yes, your stomach has gotten bigger." Then, as we're about to get on the bus to the airport, I offer to load up her suitcase. She basically tells me to not bother, that I haven't given a crap all week, and that she doesn't need me. Least I could have done was called her. I'm confused, so I'm like, WTF? Called? She says that she's an old person and that she could have hurt herself or something, and I'm just gone somewhere and can't even call or care if something happened. She's at poolside with friends, so I didn't realize I needed to worry, but I guess it's bugged her all week, which was the last straw. I went and checked myself in and left her to her own devices. Now she's sitting all sad, talking crap to her new mates to her, because having a free holiday isn't enough. Story 19. My younger sister rented a house from my older sister, and her husband destroyed it before eventually moving out, leaving my older sister and her husband with a house requiring repairs and remodeling costs in the thousands. When called out on it after my older sister got over the shock, my younger sister doubled down and said she didn't see a problem and didn't know why it was being brought up so late, and they hadn't realized anything was wrong with the house. A few things. My older sister and her husband should have gotten a damage deposit and rental agreement, but didn't because family. They had assumed their rental wouldn't be destroyed. Still on them that they didn't do that, though. And they kick themselves every day that they didn't do any of that. Luckily, after spending their entire summer fixing up the place, they're going to be able to sell it for a small profit still, but nowhere near what they would have gotten. So they learned their lesson, I guess. The house where we didn't realize anything was wrong, the lawn hadn't been mowed all summer. They let their 2 dogs and cat pee and poop all over the house. There was mold growing so far out of the toilet it had grown onto the seat itself. The carpet in the master bedroom was so covered in animal hair that when we moved the bed, the carpet under there was a different color entirely. That was par for the course for the other carpeting too. All pee stains and animal hair. I'm not even sure anything was ever vacuumed or rug cleaned. I guess they had a box fan blowing over their cat's litter box and the whole house smelled like piss and crap because they didn't clean the litter box. There was a pile of melted dog crap in the yard dumped from a bucket next to the trash cans. So much trash. We counted 34 empty water bottles strewn around their bedroom, among the other trash everywhere in the house. There were also a ton of full trash bags heaped into a pile in the downstairs. My brothers and I helped our dad move her and her husband into their apartment from the house, and that was the second grossest place I've ever been in my life. The first belonging to a mentally ill 86-year-old woman who had 16 cats. One of my brothers almost vomited walking past the melted crap, and my other brother walked in the house and said, "I need to pee. Should I go in the bathroom or can I just go anywhere?" To this day, my younger sister and her husband are playing complete victims and are acting like all that was completely normal and they don't get why there's a problem. I honestly don't know how to interact with them now. I was so disgusted moving all their crap that day. They also didn't show up, so we did it by ourselves. The only reason I helped was because my dad would have done it no matter what. There are some other things going on there too, but I'm not going to air out all the family laundry. Sorry for the wall of text. The whole situation has been causing family drama and sides being taken, and it's all been bothering me. Story 20. My really good friend for 5 years sent me a serious "go F yourself, I don't want to be your friend anymore" text because I went to a party she wasn't invited to. It was 2 months ago, at the beginning of the summer holidays, and I wasn't going to the same high school as her, so I thought, well, I don't want to be a possessive friend who tells me to go F myself just because of one party neither. I didn't text her back, and I never got an apology text or a text from her at all. But yesterday, on the 5th back-to-school day, she went to my place. I was at school at the moment, but my dad was there. He opens the door and my friend comes in. He explains I'm not here, absolutely not aware she was not my friend anymore. She was there to give me back a game I let her use. My dad then had small talk with her. He will later tell me she looked pretty sad. When I come home several hours later, he says, "Your friend came. She's really sad you don't call or talk to her anymore. Why would you do that? You need to text her or something quickly." And that's pretty much it. I feel like it's a bit of a "am I the a-hole" post, so am I? Story 21. I've got two for you all. An old friend of mine cheated on his girlfriend 3 times. Her, being the innocent sweetheart she was, decided to forgive him all 3 times. Finally, when she'd had enough and went to dump him, he kept saying how it wasn't his fault. He had an alternate personality. No paperwork to back that up, never diagnosed. He claimed to have DPD, dependent personality disorder, and went on to hurt himself after the breakup. When I, the rebound guy, ended up getting with said girl, because I thought she was genuinely sweet and showed compassion even after the crap he pulled. Not only that, but extremely creative, confident, and artistic. Anyways, he blamed me, saying it was my intention all along to split them up. He dropped out shortly after. So I'd been dating this girl, different girl, months later, for about 2 months. Things were going great. We instantly were a match. Her parents and I got along super well and went out for meals all the time. It was absolutely perfect for so long, and then my friend comes up to me with a grim expression after 5th block. He says, quite seriously, "You're going to want to look at this, man. I'm so sorry." It was a video of her and her ex in a class making out, holding hands. When I confronted her, obviously irritated, she said I was controlling her and treating her like property. Coming from a girl who asked me to come over every single day until the absolute last minute I was allowed at her house, this was just laughable. Still, I was pretty heartbroken, if you couldn't tell. I've had bad luck with relationships and friends. I have a close-knit group of 2 friends and haven't dated since. To anyone who's read this far, thank you. Have a great day. Story 22. My friend's soon-to-be ex-wife. About 2 years ago, wife basically fractures the stability of their long-term marriage by telling husband that she's going to start seeing/sleeping with other guys outside of their marriage in the name of self-care. They'd been seeing a marriage counselor who advised them both to not forget about personal self-care, so wife took it in that direction. She told them that if he didn't let her do it, that he was controlling her and that she would leave him. She also refused to give him any info in regards to who she was dating or where she was staying on nights out, but he let her do it, thinking it would somehow save their marriage and that maybe he deserved it, even though it broke his heart. She dates around for the next couple of years, spending nights away from the house, leaving him alone to raise the kids pretty often. She also encouraged him to find a girlfriend because that's what being poly was about. He tried for a while but wasn't really interested. But then he found a girlfriend. Wife immediately starts playing the "you're cheating on me" card, along with the "you're abandoning your family" and the "I'm the victim" cards. After he reminded her that it was all her idea, she started getting ridiculously controlling over everything he did, almost on a minute-by-minute basis. So after months of emotional distress, he finally leaves her, continues taking care of the kids, paying the bills and the mortgage while wife stays in the house, working on leaving her legally. Now, whenever he talks to mutual friends and acquaintances about it, he's finding out that she's been vaguely accusing him of being abusive and manipulative, of abandoning his family, and of running off with some skank to avoid his responsibilities, and that she doesn't know what she did to deserve this. Even tried to convince his own family that he's a terrible guy. All this despite the fact that she's still seeing her boyfriends, plural, on the side throughout all of it. So I don't understand the premise of poly relationships. I never, ever will. So I can't really weigh in on the headspace of what's going on here. What's the point of staying married to someone if you're going to have like multiple partners on the side? I don't get it. Like, if you want to be poly, that's fine, but don't get married and don't have kids with somebody. Jeez. Story 23. Current girlfriend. She had trouble holding down a job due to either poor performance or her anxiety. Never learned the truth. So I tasked her with keeping the apartment clean. She would do it maybe a couple times a month when I wanted her to work on it every day. All the time I would get home from work and nothing would be done, or she just cleaned up trash and nothing else. I would get on to her for it, and she would go into a screaming tirade about how everything is so hard for her, being several states away from her family, and how her work is so unfair to her even though she spends an hour in the bathroom at the start of every shift because of her anxiety. Now I'm homeless living in a hotel, 2,000 miles away from my home state, because I believe some bullcrap about her uncle giving me a high-paying job, and don't have the money to pack up and leave. Meanwhile, she talks crap about me to her friend. Found out when I saw some of her texts, saying we always have to use her money because I blow all mine, when I'm the one paying for everything and we only use hers when mine has run out. She plays the victim and I suffer for it, but I'm too much of a coward and don't have the finances to leave right now. Story 24. Cars are refusing to let an 18-wheeler merge in an intersection of construction where it goes from 2 lanes to 1. 18-wheeler is stuck about 6 inches into the open lane and cars won't let him in. Woman in a little compact car hits the 18-wheeler going under 5 miles per hour with over a foot on the other side of her car, i.e. she had plenty of room to pass them. Cops get there and everyone agrees to move to a parking lot. Once in the parking lot, she starts complaining that her back and leg is broken and her adult son is injured. She demands an ambulance. She also says that the 18-wheeler suddenly jumped lanes and smashed into her car. The damage is a slight rub on the wheel nuts on the 18-wheeler's tire and a scratch under 6 inches, 12 centimeters, in length. She also had to reverse her car to get off of the 18-wheeler, meaning she hit the 18-wheeler. Once the ambulance gets there, they're obligated to put her on a backboard with a neck brace since she's complaining of neck and back pain. Luckily, the officer sees through the woman's BS and cites her for causing the accident. No insurance on the vehicle, and not updating her address on her license. Once the woman finds out she's being found at fault, the woman demands to be let out of the ambulance. The woman was super mad at the officer and started trying to preach Jesus, Christianity, and godliness to everyone who tried to harass the driver of the 18-wheeler and the cop. There was also cell phone footage of the woman climbing out of the passenger side of her vehicle to yell at the driver of the 18-wheeler before police got there. Story 25. Probably me. I got into my head a while ago that a new starter at work had it in for me, and I confronted him on it. He became defensive, and I took it as confirmation that he was trying to undermine me entirely while playing up to the managers. It got to the point where he'd walk past and I'd scowl at him and he'd grin, and I'd get frustrated for the entire day. I'd then say to other folk, "This guy sickens me. He's always grinning at me," and there was nothing I could do about it. I snapped at him, and he made an offhand comment about how crazy I was being. He called me crazy. He's got it in for me. Management came close to getting rid of him because he was antagonizing me. I felt vindicated that he was in the wrong and was going to leave. Nope. Turns out, he just wasn't very confident and had no prior experience in this field. He didn't know where to begin improving, and instead of me getting the managers to train him properly, I tried doing it myself and got frustrated with how it wasn't working. I had no prior experience in training people how to do my job. I put it down to never really working with actual humans. I never had to work as part of a team for the first 16 years of my working life. Started work at 16, 32 is when this happened. Why doesn't he break himself trying to catch up with the rest of us? I said to nobody in particular while shooting this guy down for grinning at me. He was likely grinning that I was scowling, not the other way around. He's actually an alright guy. I promise I'm also an alright guy. Just hugely paranoid. We're buds now. Story 26. Used to have this one friend who would always go to social media to complain how, quote, no one ever wants to hang out with me or invite me places. It makes me so depressed and lonely. Yes, that's because when we would invite her places, she would either be on her phone constantly and never pay attention to anyone around her. She would always insist on bringing her boyfriend everywhere, even when we said it was a girls-only night and had planned this for weeks. And obviously having her boyfriend there meant none of us were comfortable and couldn't talk about stuff we usually would without a practical stranger around. She would ignore whatever you said in favor of what she wanted to talk about and more. One time, when she had her rant about being depressed and lonely, I invited her to stay the night at my house and have a relaxed girl day to ourselves and catch up. I was trying to be nice and be there for her, but instead, she's already 40 minutes late. I hate people being late and unpunctual to plans. And when she finally decided to ring, she said, "Oh, I'm going to be even later, but I'm with Grace at the moment. I said it was okay to come stay the night with you too. We'll be over soon." So she was 1, late, and 2, invited someone I barely knew over to my house without my permission, and I'm the one who hates uninvited people over at my house. Then we ordered pizzas for dinner, and she decided, "Oh, I'm not able to stay the night. I have to go pick up my boyfriend and his friends from a party. And can I take these pizzas with me for them?" So overall, she complains no one cares or likes her, but when people actually try with her, she makes us instantly regret it. Story 27. My parents were angry drunks who abused and neglected my 5 siblings and I when we were kids. They've brushed it all under the rug now with my siblings, but I was the oldest and remember everything they did and said to us, and have never really gotten over it. I'm not a very forgiving person when it comes to them, especially when they've barely acknowledged what they did and have never apologized. Now I'm an adult with a child of my own, and I live far from them. For a long time, I was taking my son to see them regularly just to keep the peace, and I'm a big believer in allowing my son to make his own life choices, so I never wanted to make the decision to cut them out of his life for him. He's 4, so my only rule was that I had to be present when they spent time with him because of their history. Other than that, it was fair game. He could see them when he wanted, they could see him when they wanted, and I always made that clear. But after increasingly toxic behavior lately, I stopped taking my son to visit them. I made it clear that they made me feel unsafe and uncomfortable, and I wouldn't be making the effort to see them anymore. But they could still come to our home or meet us out somewhere anytime they wanted. That was the beginning of this year. They haven't visited since. They only wanted to see my kid on their terms, and as soon as seeing him required a little effort, they dropped him like a dead weight. But whatever. He'll know when he's older that it wasn't my decision and I tried. The kicker is, now they've started telling people that I'm keeping my son from them and blaming my husband for it. I think they might be making it out like he's abusive/controlling and won't let me see my family. They'll tell people anything as long as they feel like they're the ones that sound like the victims and come out smelling like roses. I'm so done with their crap. I feel like exposing them publicly, but then I remember I'm not them, and I don't need to cause others pain and inconvenience just to feel alive. Story 28. I take care of my parents and my deceased husband's parents. They're all old and bedridden, except my dad. He just joins in with the other 3 because he feels like if they get special treatment and don't have to help, then neither should he. If you've ever taken care of 4 bedridden people and a son all by yourself, you'd know I get quite overworked. I have to work long hours to provide food for everyone and could really use the help around the house. I asked my dad to help out and he blames it on the effing floor. He says, quote, "Maybe if the floor wasn't so cold." Really rude to me. We all have to live off cabbage soup, but he gets the luxury of not also getting tobacco. He also complains that my school-age son works too hard. He works too hard for a little boy. He said to indicate that I need to pick up the slack even more. After 20 years, he finally revealed to everyone that he was faking it when my son won a tour to a factory where they make chocolate. Instead of me being able to go with my son, My dad jumps out of bed and starts dancing and jumping. I hear on the tour he was a prick to a bunch of the other winners as well. F Grandpa Joe. Story 29. My ex's friend started working where I was working. We were good friends and life was good, until my ex cheats on me. His friend supported me throughout the whole thing, until I was able to finally leave this abusive relationship. I fell in love with him, and when I left my ex, he discovered I was now dating his ex-friend. He told his whole family and other friends I cheated on him, that I lied to him, and left him for his friend, after he treated me so well. He made everyone believe he was betrayed by his friend and turned everyone against him. He made everyone think he was the victim in the story. His sister is still my friend to this day, and their whole family resents her for being my friend since I supposedly cheated on him. His previous ex also left him and dated his friend. He treats his friends and girlfriends so badly, they end up together. As they say, misery loves company. Double the pleasure and divide the pain. Sorry, I just wanted to say that. Story 30. Got a recent case, actually. Used to live together with a couple of friends, former friends now, and they didn't have any source of income. I was then paying for bills, rent, food, mine and theirs. He said that as soon as they got their car sold, they would pay me back, and would buy what was needed for him to get back to making framed posters. He lacked the proper saw, mostly. Things got progressively worse as I had to keep paying for expenses while they weren't really doing much to get themselves back on their feet, aside from trying to sell their car, which wasn't working. We had a couple of arguments and he said they would be leaving the house, but would tell me when ahead of time. In my mind, we would sit down and negotiate how we would go about sorting out our finances and leave the house together, paying for whatever fine we had to pay for leaving before the end of the contract. Things didn't really go like that. He told me they had found a place and that they would be leaving the following day. They took 2 days to move out, even though they would already sleep at their new place on the first day. They left 2 of their 3 cats at the house with me. That's how senseless they were. They took a bunch of stuff that was mine. A bucket, some tools, parts from my vacuum cleaner, and who knows what else. They also left some random stuff of theirs here for some reason. They seemed to not exactly know what was theirs and what was mine, and kinda just randomly chose what they thought was theirs, LMAO. By then, I was already furious. I didn't consider any of them my friends anymore, and just wanted them to pay me what was owed and give back my stuff. Hell, I even noticed how both our buckets were piled together while they were sorting stuff, and made sure to separate them so they wouldn't take it by accident. They still took it. I sent them text messages through Facebook, some of them audio messages, asking them to give back my stuff, and also that I would send them receipts for whatever was related to me moving out of the house. The fine, painting service for the house, etc. I was talking to him then, and he started to get ever more upset at what I was saying, even though I was just saying it in a cold yet respectful manner. They didn't deserve much more than that, of course. He started saying he wouldn't listen to my audios, that I was being disrespectful, mean, etc. They ended up blocking me on Facebook and any other social media. I tried getting in touch via the girl's mother. She's a lawyer, by the way. She said she would listen to their side and get back to me. I never got any response from her after that, even after insisting several times. They decided to talk to me through mutual friends. They sent me a message through a friend telling me that I, quote, had to be high or something because they had said they would be paying monthly, and also that I should stop gossiping about this to other people. I was, of course, just telling my side of the story to some of my closest friends and friends I had in common with them. That's what people tend to do when they're in distress, of course. Unless you're some self-centered recluse, like they most certainly were. It has certainly been one of the most stressful periods in my life, and I'm still getting back on my feet, both financially and psychologically. It's been months, and they're yet to pay me a single cent. Story 31. My mom opened important mail with my name on it. She brought the mail to me saying, "I think you opened this a while ago and I found it on your desk." One piece was a new credit card I was expecting, and I definitely did not open. The other was an ID card from my university, and she said, "I think your university sent you a card." And there was nothing on the outside of the mail that indicated that. She also tried to sneakily open and reclose the mail, but her hair was stuck in them. Then, when I asked her why she opened my mail, she kept denying that she did. Then she tried to punch me in the face, and I blocked her by grabbing her wrist, and she screamed I was hurting her. She then goes on to call me a stupid effing female dog. Go sit on a chicken. How can anyone love you? It's a surprise your boyfriend can stand you, etc. I come back a few minutes later asking her to promise not to open my mail, and instead goes on about how I hurt her wrist, which is a lie. Conversation ends by her saying, "Maybe I'll try harder to maybe not open your mail." So, need a little bit more info here in order to fully pass judgment. Are you a minor still living at home with your parents while you go to school? Are you an adult that's living at home with your parents while you're doing whatever else? That shifts the context entirely. Like if you're still a child, your mom has every right in the world as your legal guardian to open your mail. If not, then yeah, that's a totally different issue, but you're still living in her household. I don't know, man. That's just weird. I don't know why that's such a big deal, that your mom's opening your mail. Like, what are you hiding? Mom sounds a little dramatic too, though, so I don't know. I'm going to declare that a stalemate. Story 32. When I was a kid, mostly between the ages of 8 to 14, my father was an abusive alcoholic. He used to beat me nearly daily, verbally degrade me, and was just all around unpleasant. I had 2 younger brothers. One was 9 months younger than me, and the other was 7 years younger. As a result of my dad's drinking, he was pretty incapable of looking after my brothers properly, and as I was the oldest, I took it upon myself to look after them. Well, the 9 months younger brother and I didn't get on very well, and as such, we argued a lot, which would usually end in him running to dad, which would result in a beating for me. As I got older, I ended up getting pretty depressed, tried committing self-unaliving 3 times, and ran away 13 times. The 13th time I ran away was shortly after my 14th birthday. The night before, my slightly younger brother had nearly killed me by suffocating me while my dad watched on. I ran away the next morning and told the police that I refused to go back but wanted to be put into foster care. I was put into care and refused any contact with my family for many years. When I next met my slightly younger brother, we were both in university and went to get drinks. The conversation turned to childhood, and I lamented about my rough upbringing. This is when he decided to tell me that he just had it as bad as I did, if not worse, despite the fact that he was the golden boy and Dad had never laid a hand on him. It seems petty, but it pisses me off that he thinks he was treated as poorly as I was, especially considering I kept him fed and in clean clothes, and that many of the beatings I took were from times where he'd pissed off my dad. Look, it's not a pissing match. Like, why are you guys comparing, as siblings, comparing the trauma of your upbringings with each other? Like, if anything, this is a time for you guys to come together in solidarity and move on together as siblings. Come on. Story 33. My parents divorced back when I was 12, but it finally became official when I turned 16. My dad, since then, had been fighting PTSD, depression, anxiety, and other mental issues ever since he got back from Iraq about a decade ago. My mom is and was a bit narcissistic back then, and my dad still tells me it was like raising 3 kids instead of 2. After initially separating back when I was 12, my dad lived with his parents across town. My mom wasn't really the best at raising us since she had bipolar depression and didn't really teach us anything aside from what not to do from example. All the while, my dad paid child support that wasn't mandatory since they hadn't officially gotten divorced, so about 80% of his disability check would go to us. All the while, my mom drilled it into mine and my brother's head that my dad wasn't providing enough to feed us, pay bills, pay house, pay car, and fuel her weed addiction. I know it's not addictive, but she really acted that way. By the time I was 16, I had this minor hatred for my dad, who I know now was really struggling. I stayed with him at my grandparents' house for a month or so and really saw how bad his condition was. The divorce finally came around, and I was in the courtroom on my dad's side with a lawyer to do all sorts of paperwork. My mom freaks out and buys one herself. The court session was really quick with the judge, asking who I wanted to stay with, and I said my dad, obviously. My mom is tearing up and said the most infuriating thing I've ever heard from her. But what about the money? My mom felt a priority of my dad's money over me, and I didn't really comprehend what she said until I was outside. She had no custody of me, and I saw her on a few occasions afterwards. Even now, as I'm 18 years old and in college, she rarely calls me, only about a month or 2 at a time. Most contact with her is initiated by me, and almost all calls from her are when she's in a depressed state and needs confirmation that I'm something she did good in her life. As it probably sounds, I'm still very sour with my mom, but regardless, she's my mother, and I only wish her the best. But it's pretty hard when she calls/texts my stepmom to harass her. She currently lives about 4 hours away from me, and from what I can tell, has gotten into some other drugs and with bad people. Story 34. So we have this rat-faced guy that comes into the Safeway I work at. What he does is he would take sale tags from items and come back later when the sale was over to say they were priced wrong in the system. Basically, he did nothing but steal items by insisting they were free. He would come in and 5 minutes later have a bunch of items, mostly meat, that he insisted was priced wrong in the system. One day when he tries this, the cashier saw through his bullcrap, probably because the sales tag was expired. This guy had a full-on meltdown and started yelling at him and causing a huge lineup. Even the people in the line behind him wanted to punch his lights out. He called our El Salvadorian manager a Mexican female dog and told him to go die in Trump's concentration camp. It was at this point that the security guard stepped in and dragged him off. Meat Guy was screaming bloody murder, that he was being assaulted, and he ended up calling the cops. Cops just said we should ban this guy and that if he ever came back, we were to call the police right away. And that's how he got banned. But wait, it gets better. Or worse. I just recently learned that he got himself unbanned after talking to our lead manager's boss. He also called our security company to female dog to them about our security guard, who thankfully asked him for his side of the story. Best part is that our night manager said we can treat him like crap if we want, and he'd turn a blind eye and vouch for us. Story 35. Girl I used to work with offered to stay late after a particularly whiny day of hers to wait on a client coming into town to help them get situated. I offered a dozen times to stay and wait with her and to bring her food, and she turned down all of it. So I went and got food and asked her again if she was still at work and if she wanted something, and she said she decided to go back to the house and would go back to work later to meet the client. Alright, cool. I get to the house we share with our boss when we're out of town, and she's not there, but she's texting me about how the client still isn't there, how hungry she is, how rude it is of the client to not wait until the next day to come, and how our boss is making her wait there. Our boss was home and asleep and told us she didn't care who stayed or if we left, as long as someone was there when the client arrived. She loved to put herself in similar situations so that she could act like she was the victim all the time. That girl also liked to get high on the job and would get offended/mad when our boss would catch her and give her an ultimatum about her job if she didn't stop. Same deal with when she got caught lying that she was helping other coworkers back at our base, and they texted the boss, not even knowing she was supposed to be down there since she never was. She got fired for lying and turning off the security cameras so that the boss wouldn't be able to see her not working while boss was out of town. Some say she's still complaining about how hard the boss was on her and how hard she had to work to this day. Imagine a world where you have to go to work and do work, actually work. What a wild concept. My goodness. Thank goodness this is all hypothetical, of course. Story 36. My sister. There are many things that she's done that falls into this category. Two come to mind. 1. She was at work when her wallet was stolen. Now she's a vendor who goes to Walmart and stocks their greeting cards. She put her wallet and car keys in the basket with her inventory and walked away from said basket and into the next aisle. Surprisingly, when she got back, wallet and keys were gone. The car wasn't hers, but our mother's car. Today, months later, she still says it wasn't her fault and she was robbed. Her license was in that wallet, as was the social security cards for both of her kids. 2. My sister and her family were getting evicted from their apartment. They owed several months of back rent, and eventually the apartment complex told them that they had had enough of their crap and it was over. Now, this is a problem that could have been solved years prior had she gotten her worthless husband to get a job. But she'd rather beg for money and blame us when her power was cut or she got fined for driving without insurance. She went looking for a new place to rent before the deadline for the eviction hit. She found a house in her price range, needed $1,000 deposit before even seeing the house. Now, a smart person doesn't buy a car without test driving it, and a smart person doesn't put down a deposit on a house without walking through said house. She just wired him the money instantly, to a bank in Africa. When she got to the rental house after work, there was a sign that read, "This house is not for rent. Stop knocking on our door. No, we don't know who's been scamming you." She blames Western Union for allowing her to send that money. She blames the people who own that house for not helping her out. She blames her bank for not refunding the money back to her. She has said it's somehow my fault, even though I didn't learn of this until after she got conned. She did get another apartment, amazingly, and was evicted from that less than 2 months later. We ended up having to help her move out of that apartment in one day. I told her that most of her kids' stuff will get left behind, and she blamed me, saying that if I wasn't a lazy dumbass that we could do it. I said, "You've been off work since Thursday and it's Sunday. You've been watching movies and not packing, and you're yelling at me when I'm telling you there isn't enough time to pack up everything a family of 4 owns in one day and move it into storage?" She lit her cigarette and told me it wouldn't be a problem if I wasn't worthless, a comment she said in front of our parents. I wasn't there all day. I stopped to take a drink from a water bottle, and she yelled at me for not working. after I had just gotten back inside from carrying some furniture to the truck. And it wasn't just a get back to work thing. It was laced with insults and profanities. At that point, I told our parents that I wasn't going to continue to sacrifice my Sunday working for free for an ungrateful female dog who isn't lifting a finger and yelling at me every chance she gets. Story 37. My ex-friend with her boyfriend, trying to act like he's a bad boyfriend when she, 1. lied about the child she was pregnant with being his. I know she knew because she told me whenever they got into little spats and broke up, she'd say, "Well, it's not his anyway, so what's it matter? This kid didn't even look like him." The boyfriend has a dark tan, brown eyes, and thick brown hair. The baby has thin blonde hair, blue eyes, and fair skin. Granted, the mother had all the same traits as the baby, so she could get by with saying he just took after her. 2. The boy was about 15 when this happened, so he dropped out of school to help take care of her and move in with her. He was around like 18 or 19 during the time, so yeah, she could have gone to jail over all this. 3. She tried even convincing me at one point that the baby was his, even though she admitted to me it was. I don't know if she forgot or what. But when the baby's actual girlfriend he was with had a baby around the same time as my ex-friend, she showed me a picture. "Oh, that's a cute picture of your baby," I said. She got mad and started going on a rant about how it wasn't her baby. It was the other girl's baby, and people were claiming that they looked alike. But they didn't. Yes, they did, to the point I could barely find a difference in the two, other than the other girl's baby had thicker hair. 4. Would bring up stuff that happened months ago and then use it against him. Example, she was talking about how a girl he dated in the past before he knew her had fake boobs. He responds with, "That's not true." She asked him how he knew, and he explained that he dated her and they did things. Well, a couple of months go by and then suddenly she kicks him out of the house on the hottest day of the year, comes over to my house after locking her house so he couldn't get back inside, and started complaining about him being in relation with her and how it suddenly just made her so angry he'd do something like that. No, she was not pregnant during this time. The baby was already a few months old, so I can't blame this on hormones. 5. Tried to convince me that vaccines caused autism and, when I didn't believe her, refused to talk to me for a few days, claiming I was just so stubborn that she couldn't talk to me about stuff. 6. Once, she left me with her baby while she ran to the store. She was gone for 3 hours, and I didn't know how to take care of a kid. I agreed to watch him for like 15 minutes, considering I lived right next to the store she claimed she was going to. And 7, would purposely pick fights with her boyfriend's parents, complain about them on Facebook, only giving some details, saying, "This is why I refuse to let them see their grandkids." Just the stupidest stuff. One of the dumbest reasons? She got mad at him and full out admitted the kid wasn't his in front of him. When they tried to get back together, she said she was just angry at him and didn't mean it. But his parents demanded a DNA test. After months of pushing and being unrelenting, she finally did it. I don't know if she actually began to believe her own lie, for the guy threatened to leave her for good. Guess what? It wasn't his. But guess what else? By the time they got the results back, she already announced her second pregnancy, and I think this one did turn out to be his, but I'm not sure. Story 38. When my sister was 18, still in high school, and I was 15, she got upset at dinner because our mom wouldn't stop talking about our grades and went to her room. 5 minutes later, she comes out with her car keys and school bag, saying she was going to her then-fiancé's house for the night. She was irrationally angry. I'm talking red-faced and screaming. That kind of response was way over the top. That made my mom think it wouldn't be safe for her to drive in that state of mind, so my mom tried to stop her. In her effort to do so, she grabbed her keys. They pulled back and forth, and eventually, my mom got the keys and accidentally sent my sister falling backwards. This only fueled the fire. My sister started hitting my mom. Mind you, my mom is pretty slow and had rheumatoid arthritis, which was hurting her bad that night. I step in and try to separate them, but my sister just kept going and was holding on to my mom's shirt. When she wouldn't let go, I started hitting her arm, yelling at her to stop hitting my mom. She tried to hit me too, but I swatted her hands away. After that, she ran into the garage. I grabbed her shirt in tears, begging her not to leave. She turned around and grabbed a fistful of my hair and pulled so hard that it left a bruise. I let go and crumpled to the ground in a fetal position and start having a bad panic attack, screaming and everything. My sister ended up running a couple blocks, and then her fiancé picked her up. When I pulled myself together, I grabbed my phone and started texting him. I tried to tell him what actually happened because I knew that my sister would try to twist the story. He texted back. He talked down to me like I was 6 years old, saying things like, "You're just too young to understand." He came back for my sister's stuff later. Before he got there, I wrote a note and put it in her bag, saying that I don't want them to even acknowledge me at school the next day. My sister ended up calling my mom on her phone and told her about the note and how it hurt her feelings. My mom just laughs and hangs up. I don't want to say that it was entirely my sister's fault that this all happened, because she has a mental illness that was particularly bad at the time due to stress from school. I guess she just snapped. Anyway, we're all cool now, and she's doing much better mentally. Her then-fiancé is now her ex-husband, but that's another story. I'm moving in with my sister when I graduate high school this year. So glad that we got a happy ending here. Would like to hear a little bit more about how we got to that point, from her storming out of the house, grabbing a fistful of your hair and ripping it and leaving a bruise, to now you're moving in together and you made good. Definitely a good happy ending. Just wanted some more deets. That's all. Story 39. This one's a double whammy. My brother and his ex. So first with my brother, he cheated on his girlfriend, actually more than once. Now, my brother is overall a good guy, but he's a lot like me in that he's a bit cocky and entitled, while also being rather insecure. What that results in is him constantly trying to reaffirm his cockiness, while trying to push away any feelings of discontent and self-consciousness. I saw him going down the same path that I did with my ex in college, and I begged him not to make the same mistake, but he did. And after the second time, she was done with him. He just couldn't understand why she started acting like a female dog, according to him. And about a month later, he hears through the grapevine that she went on a date with another guy and acts like she's betrayed him, when he's the one who cheated. Needless to say, I fear he hasn't learned his lesson, because he's using her essentially going off the deep end as justifying him dodging a bullet. Which leads me to her. So, like I said, I can justify her dumping my brother, and even crap-talking him to a degree. That's a natural reaction of being cheated on, I'd say. However, she went all out to make his summer hell. At first, I was in denial that she was doing things intentionally, but then I began to see how she'd use her mutual friends and siblings to leak info about her sex life, and personal life in general, to him. Now, here's the thing. She works for our family business. This is something I was against from the start for fear of this very reason, but it was pretty well understood at the time that they were really serious. After the breakup, my dad actually sympathized with her and tried to accommodate by scheduling them separate shifts and stuff, but he warned her to not bring any drama into the store. Almost immediately, she began seeing a coworker, and during her shifts, she more or less tells everyone who will listen about how awful my brother is and what he did. Now, when my brother would work, a lot of people would give him the cold shoulder, and the dudes were more or less plotting their chance. After more than a few instances of coming in high, openly fighting with my brother in front of customers, and more or less making the workplace toxic, while my brother was the cause of the breakup, he kept it outside of work. 3 months after the breakup, she was still stirring the pot, and at this point my dad had enough. He sat her down and said he'd have to let her go. It's also worth noting that she'd been low-key talking about another job she's picked up, and had clearly stated she could go full-time there if she wanted. Turns out that was a lie. Now she's trashing my dad and our family every chance she gets, even though we did everything we could to at least maintain a friendship with her. Story 40. OMG, my grandmother. She's the oldest woman in the family, 87, and sees herself as a matriarch. Unfortunately, she's also highly toxic and narcissistic. My brother and sister-in-law are getting ready to have their baby, due in a couple months. My grandmother flipped out over the name, it's unusual, and how they're going to have 2 middle names to honor his father and her father, instead of our grandparents. She's so stuck in the 1970s, she thinks $8 an hour is too much money, and she called my SIL names, said she'd be a bad mom, she's just a gravel belly loser. For those of you with class who don't use words like that, gravel belly is a derogatory term for Mexicans. My SIL is Spanish. And that my brother is going to be a bad dad. She said it's her fault she miscarried 2 pregnancies before this, and how she's praying this one goes too. Weeks of abuse from her through phone calls and emails. My brother blocked her from his life. She's not allowed to come visit the baby, see pictures of the baby, or interact with the baby ever. And he cut her out of his life. So she called me. I don't give a F if she dies tomorrow, so IDK what she called me, and bickered about how horrible people are to her, and about how whenever done anything wrong, and about how my SIL is brainwashing my brother, blah blah blah. I hung up. Her nonsense is ridiculous. She causes drama wherever she goes and blames everyone for her issues. Story 41. This will probably get buried, but I think it fits well. I'm a high school teacher, and every year a handful of kids want me to write them a letter of recommendation. About 3 or 4 years ago, a student asked me, and I tell them I'd love to do it. I put together a rough draft of what I knew about the kid and emailed them, asking where they would like me to send the letter and for any information about them they would like me to add to the letter. Work history, clubs I might know they're a part of, personal challenges, etc. Never heard back from them. Sometime in December, about 2 months after I sent them the email, I got called in for a meeting with the principal. I guess the kid told his parents I never let him know I was done or had started working on it. I did, or even asked him information to include. I also did that. And his parents went straight to the superintendent, claiming I had ignored the kid's attempts to contact me about his letter after agreeing, and now he won't have a letter of recommendation for his college choices. The principal, who was a little angry, but she also knew me pretty well, so didn't accuse me of anything before she allowed me to respond to what the parents claimed, asks why I didn't do any of this after telling the kid I'd write him a letter of recommendation. I then proceeded to show the principal the emails I sent the kid. Meeting over. Later that day, the kid thanks me for the letter and says it's good as is and asks me to send it to a few state schools. Never got an apology or anything from the student or his parents. Lesson here? Save your emails. All of them. Create folders and subfolders, but don't delete emails. Just to elaborate on not deleting emails, the same applies for texts. You have to have a paper trail for everything. Even the most inconsequential conversations, so they might seem, could end up being quite consequential later on. So yes, always keep up with paper trail. Emails, texts, make sure that all communication is in writing. Story 42. Oh, this is perfect. About a month ago, a woman was hit while cycling in my city, and the driver drove off without stopping. This article was posted by the CBC, in which the cyclist claimed that she was hit in the bike lane after signaling and slowing down to take a left turn by crossing the roadway. This fueled many threads on our local subreddit and on Facebook, which chastised the driver for not paying attention to cyclists and generally complained of drivers in my city. The next day, my coworker informed me that his recently installed Nest Cam happened to catch the entire incident. The video shows that the cyclist did not signal or even check for traffic before cutting from the bike lane on the right, across the roadway towards the street she was turning onto. She was traveling very fast downhill and was tucked into her handlebars in an attempt to be more aerodynamic. I'm 99% sure that she was thinking like a race car driver and that she wanted to hit the apex of the turn without slowing. The cyclist veered into the unsuspecting car, which happened to be passing her as she began to turn. The car slammed on its brakes in an attempt to avoid her, but there was no way the accident could have been avoided at that point. It's obviously horrible that the driver fled the scene, but the cyclist's story attempted to flip the situation and play victim. Story 43. The husband in this story was my neighbor growing up. His wife is the laziest slob I've ever seen. She's so disgusting. When my father-in-law met her, he later commented on her earwax and how he could smell her lady parts. We ran into each other several states away, and they were on hard times. They had just come to town trying to build a better life. He found work quick, but she was slow finding it. When we offered to let them rent our basement, she had just gotten a job working at the bakery. We rented them our basement that had 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, and a living room, as well as access to laundry and full use of my fully stocked kitchen, for almost nothing so they could get on their feet. Their previous arrangement consisted of a 10-by-5 bedroom for the 3 of them, and they were paying almost the same. Spoiler alert, she spent all their money on stupid crap online and eating out every night. They didn't save a single penny while in our home. The moment they moved in, she quit working. She didn't mention it until I asked how her job was going when she didn't leave my basement for 2 weeks, except to go out to eat. She told me they fired her because she had to pick up her kid from school. She never found another job while staying with us for about a year. She said she couldn't work because she had to watch her kid, but he would say he was hungry and she would only feed him junk food snacks. I witnessed him telling her he wanted real food and asking for eggs and toast. This lazy female dog told him it was too much work and to grab a fruit roll-up. I taught him how to make scrambled eggs right then and there. He was 8 years old and couldn't read 3-letter words. I tried to work with him, even took him to the library. She then decided I was making her look bad and forced him to stay away from us. Poor kid hated school because he was being bullied for the aforementioned reason and his weight. She just let him skip out most of the time. This one is going to be a trigger, so let me explain myself. I come from a family of overweight people. My brother lost over 150 pounds. I have hyperthyroidism and have a hard time keeping off weight and keeping my energy up, but I work hard at it. My mom went through drastic weight loss as well. That being said, her weight is not my issue at all. My main issue was she literally sat on her ass in bed for almost a year straight in my basement, refused to do basic tasks for her child, and then had the nerve to try and get pity for being overweight. She acted like her weight and health had absolutely nothing to do with her actions. She would go around telling people she tried so hard to lose weight and that it was all hormones. The thing is, she was the one bringing up the subject. Then she would try and shame and discourage me from eating healthy. She was literally 4'9" and 320 pounds, and it absolutely was not her fault whatsoever. She couldn't even take a shower without her husband's help. When we all went to the lake, she sat in the car until her phone died and she forced her family to leave. Frankly, I don't care if you think I'm an a-hole because she disgusts me. Her actions disgust me, and her physical appearance is a direct manifestation of her actions. Finally, enough was enough. She spent more time in our house than we did. She kept keeping her kid home from school, and they ended up doubling our internet, electricity, and water bills. We gave them 3 full months to find another place. During that time, they dumped oil in my neighbor's yard, and their dogs consumed some. Luckily, they weren't killed. They chewed up a bush branch covered in it, didn't directly consume. My neighbor commented on cleaning up the fluffy, furry buttholes. They did this right before they left, and they're lucky my neighbors didn't file charges. We had the incident on camera. They also dumped oil in a field behind our house and put eggs behind the heater vents. They stole a bunch of random little things like spices, light fixtures, shower head. I've never met such trash in my life, and it honestly changed my perspective on people. When father-in-law made those comments about her, I jumped to her defense. Now I realize you truly can tell a lot about someone by how they present themselves. Story 44. Responding to a comment in this thread made me realize how much my first mentor teacher was like this. I was in a fairly typical school, if you ask me. Several bad apples spoil the whole class sort of thing. My mentor has a horrible time controlling her classes. I was only there for 2 days a week in the afternoon at the time, so only saw one of the classes, but I heard it applied to all the classes. She couldn't get the class to settle down ever, but just continued through lessons without a care that only 5 out of 30 kids weren't talking and actually listening. Lost her temper at them a lot, which didn't deter the kids at all, and several actually went out of their way to make her angry because they thought it was funny, and then they didn't have to do any work. When she was done with the lesson and the kids were doing their practice work, she would sit at her desk on her phone or doing something else while I did all the work helping the kids. One time after class, I had to sit down to do some of my own homework and had started to try to ask to debrief from the day, and she blew me off. I just did my homework quietly, waiting till she was done with whatever. Come time for my review, and my supervisor comes to the school, sees all the crap I have to deal with, and I finally, after weeks of my professors and friends listening to my stories and seeing what a toll going to this internship was taking on me, get pulled out and placed at a different school. On the way out of class one evening after my new assignment, my friend, who was at the school on a day I wasn't there, told me how my mentor had told our supervisor that I was the one doing all her bad behavior, and I was the reason the class was so out of control. My friend had actually told my professor all this info, and they had worked behind the scenes without telling me to get me out as fast as possible. They hadn't told me till after the switch because they didn't want me confronting my first mentor on my own and getting myself into actual trouble. Story 45. My dad has occasional road rage issues. He and my mother were 20 miles from home after an 800-mile road trip. My dad got cut off by a woman in a car at a stoplight. It's important to say here that they were at a stop and no accident occurred. She just did a dick move and cut him off. Normal people would maybe honk or go, "This female dog," under their breath. Instead, my dad lays on the horn, flips her off, and does not stop yelling obscenities as he starts to move again, and promptly isn't watching where he's going and runs into the back of a trailer. He spent the next 2 months blaming the woman for the accident. Like, Dad, you weren't watching where you were going and ran into something. But I never would have done that if she hadn't cut me off. Like, he couldn't accept the fact that those 2 incidents weren't related. This was 2 years ago now, and nobody really talks about it. It was a minor fender bender, so it wasn't a big deal or anything, but the sheer craziness of him not accepting reality was starting to bother me. Luckily, nothing like that has happened again, and my mom says he isn't as angry driving anymore. Story 46. I lived with a few roommates, upperclassmen, when I was a freshman in college. I didn't know them very well, but a mutual friend told me they needed another roommate, and I was looking for a place and didn't want to live at home anymore. The roommate who called all the shots, let's call her Felicia, was super involved in politics, and I couldn't care less at the time. She was a campaign manager for my local election. My stepdad was friends with the person running against Felicia's boss. One day, my stepdad gave me a few yard signs for his friend's campaign and asked me to put them in our yard, but I didn't out of respect for Felicia. One of our roommates saw the signs in the back of my car and notified Felicia. They all ganged up on me and accused me of working for the other guy's campaign. I explained the situation, but they didn't believe me. From that point forward, they were all really crappy towards me. I was making dinner one evening, and Felicia came into the kitchen and started talking about her campaign and aspiring political career. I told her I didn't care much for politics, and she proceeded to yell in my face, "Do you know who I am?" Because she was an intern one summer for a well-known political talk show. I was never ugly back to any of them until after this conversation. I found a paper on the refrigerator with nasty things written about my stepdad's friend. One of these things was F stepdad's friend's name. I was fed up and erased his name and wrote you. Yes, childish, I know. This was like 13 years ago. Felicia, of course, saw it, stormed into my room to yell at me. Honestly, I don't remember much of what happened here as much as what happened afterwards. I was in the kitchen cooking again, and she put a kettle on the stove. I finished and went to my room to eat. I saw the kettle starting to boil and decided to leave it. After all, I knew who she was. Certainly a big, important person can remember they put a kettle on the stove. Anyway, she didn't remember, and it unfortunately boiled down and caught on fire. One of our roommates found it before I could run into the kitchen and put it out. The kettle melted, and the stove knob melted. Of course, she blamed me for it 100%. She also went into my room after I had left the house and poured water on my keyboard, ruining it, then lied about it later. I moved out, though. It was ugly, but I learned a lot from living with someone like that. Story 47. I used to have this horrid roommate, just a terrible human being in most ways I knew her. She was a slob, loud, rude, went into my room when I wasn't home, and extremely aggressive about all of this. While we got along okay for a while when she first moved in, it started to get bad and peaked when she started getting a weekly food delivery box and would never dispose of the box, or send it back as you're supposed to. I started out by calmly asking/reminding her to make sure she either sent it back or recycled it, but to either way, stop leaving it on the floor outside the kitchen. Then I started just throwing it away myself. She was pissed that I would touch her stuff. Started writing notes on the box about how it was her property and to not touch it. The absolute climax of our interactions, I came home from work one day and wanted to study in the living room. Please keep in mind that this is legally and factually also my apartment and she was a tenant. But to do so, on my couch using my table, I had to move some of her stuff. Really, I just put it in a neat pile on a table. There was no organization that I disrupted. And she came home and had an absolute tantrum about her stuff being moved. So I'm lying on the couch and she starts putting her stuff back on the table, on top of my things, and then starts throwing the things I'm not holding all around the room. She goes into the kitchen and starts throwing my things around the room. I haven't moved nor said anything in this time. I'm still lying on the couch reading. She then goes into her room, takes off her pants, and then comes back and sits on my legs in an "I'm going to sit here because this is my space and you're invading it" living room. Common space, my name on the lease. I struggle because she's sitting on me in her underwear, and she calls the police to report that I've assaulted her. I obviously immediately start video recording once I hear her on the phone with the police, and so I now have a video of her sitting on me in her underwear while on the phone saying she's been assaulted, and then calmly getting up to put pants on so she could let them into the building. After she hangs up, she makes a statement, paraphrasing, about how she's doing this for my best interest because I need to learn how to treat people. The responding officers explained to me how I could go about getting a restraining order after looking around the apartment, seeing the mess, and hearing what I had to say. Edit to add, I had a camera in my room, so I had visual proof of her coming into my room and using/taking things. There were so many things she was doing, but the box just became a central theme. It was super dumb. Her boyfriend and my other roommate and he kept himself completely out of this, not even to back her up or defend her. To my knowledge, they're still together to this day, and she was emotionally abusive to him in between. Story 48. I know far too many victims than I'd like to, but I think a more recent example would be my mother's son. Side note, we all have the same parents, but my sister and I refuse to claim him after everything we've had to deal with because of him. He's 2 years older than I am, but he's never done anything in his life. He's had 2 jobs since high school, Walmart and Dairy Queen, neither of which lasted a week. Walmart, he immediately started laying out because he was sick and had our mom call in for him. After a week of working 2 days and calling in 2, they canned him. He got a job at Dairy Queen, but was told to cut up strawberries and bananas even though I'm allergic, so he quit. Since then, he had done nothing but lay around, terrify everyone in the house, be physical, violent, lazy, and just destructive. Things don't go his way? Break something or hit someone. He didn't have to work by his logic because I don't. Forget the disabilities involved. If I can be lazy, he can too. I once saw him in his underwear 3 times in one day and brought it up with our mom. Our sister was young at the time, and I didn't want to see that. She didn't need to see that either. She told him to please wear pants if he left his room. He came out with his whole underwear drawer and throws it at her, telling her that, quote, "Since you treat me like a slave, here's my underwear so you can dole them out to me." Of the most screwed up encounters with that creature, that's the weirdest by far. But last year it came to a head. He had gotten away with so much, allowed to do so much, that he basically had free reign in the house. He would shove us aside when he needed something or wanted us out of the way. He saw me heading to the bathroom, shoves me aside so he can get there first, and just stands there with the door open so he can piss and wash his face. I go back into the living room muttering about how it never fails. He always shoves me out of the way when he sees me going somewhere. He follows me into the living room and slings his wet rag at me, screaming that he's sick of me talking about him like that. He starts throwing every single thing he can at me. He hit my mom with the clothes basket, so I finally got up and told her, "You can either get rid of him or I'll tell everyone everything you've ever allowed him to get away with." I grabbed my sister, grabbed a hammer for protection, and locked us up in my bedroom. He starts screaming and stomping around and slams his door so violently there's a crack in it. He's been a constant in our lives for years. Whenever he would calm down, the excuses were, "I'm sorry, I'm tired. I have insomnia. I don't sleep well and it makes me angry." My mom always ate it up. This time, she tells him she's had enough. He's gotta go. She'll help him get a job, find him a place, but he's not staying. Then it becomes my fault, along with my sister's. We're the bad ones. We provoke him. We're allowed to do anything we want, say anything we want. We treat him like garbage and always have, and he's just standing up for himself. My sister is almost 11 years younger than I am. She follows me around like a puppy, always has, and she's only shoved him once for retaliation when he was standing in the doorway refusing to move. Otherwise, we've never put our hands on him. We've not hit him like he has us or thrown things at him like he has us. She and I share one bedroom in the house that has a lock on the door because we've always been terrified of him. Growing up, she always thought his behavior was normal for people. It took until last year for her to realize it's not. Story 49. This is a really long story, so I'll shorten it as best I can and add a TLDR at the bottom. In my early 20s, I had a roommate who was the definition of a cherry picker Christian. Went to church, participated on church missions, and whenever she did something wrong, she wouldn't need to apologize because, quote, "If I just ask for forgiveness from God, he will forgive me," which was self-permitting to let her sleep with her boyfriend, be manipulative/rude to others, act high and mighty, and self-entitled. Not all Christians are like this, of course, but she was so stereotypical. We lived together for a year, and in that time, she managed to lie to my face, gaslight me, manipulate me into doing what she wanted, accused me of stealing her stuff, complained I didn't do things the way she liked it, got mad that her boyfriend, who was a compulsive liar and cheater, was looking at me more than her, never took blame for her wrongdoings, always found excuses for not paying her share of rent on time, and looked for attention wherever she could. She was a total drama starter. I finally got so sick of her crap and told her to GTFO of my apartment. Her name wasn't on the lease, thankfully, and she threatened me that she wouldn't pay me rent for being kicked out even though it was a month's notice. I called her bluff and told her that I didn't care, and she immediately started to ask me if she could stay a little longer to have a place lined up. I told her no. When she didn't have someone to buy her desk, she told me that she was keeping the key until she sold it. I told her no, and if she did, I would get police involved. Finally, she moves out, and she leaves the place a mess that I have to clean up. Fast forward, I have her blocked on social media and have expressed that I want her nowhere in my life. But I have her number to tell her about mail that has come for her until it's all rerouted to her new place. She finds the Craigslist ad that I posted for a new roommate and tells me it's a good-looking ad and asks if I found a new roommate. Tells me she's sorry that my ex and I broke up right after him and I broke up, wishes me a happy birthday on my birthday, and asked me numerous times for her mail even when I tell her when there is some, I would let her know. She continues to text me over and over to the point where I ignore her, so she sends me a barrage of messages about how it's illegal to look through her mail and keep it for myself. I tell her once she has more mail that I have it, and she immediately says to me, "I thought you changed your number or blocked me. Why didn't you message me? You were making me worry unnecessarily about my mail. You had my phone number, so you should have told me what was going on." Once the mail situation was all sorted out, I blocked her number. So the only way she can see what I'm doing is through someone else's socials or creating new ones, all of which she has done. Story 50. My mom has issues that were never resolved as a child, so she's become a compulsive liar along with making herself a constant victim as to why her life sucks. 18 years ago, when I was a teen, my mom started working at a new location. She's very social, so she makes friends right away because she's very manipulative and it's all for the benefit of herself rather than actual friendship. A few weeks after she started working there, apparently she started telling coworkers that her children run amok, belittle her, and take advantage of her earnings. All false, of course. She never really loved us and blamed our existence on our father who ran out on us. Her coworkers eventually set up a fund for her, and every week they would hand her the funds raised by employees to pay her bills and feed herself, because we were taking everything she had. Again, so false. A couple of months go by and my older sister has a boyfriend. This boyfriend of hers is the son of the coworker that started the fund, and the person that my mom has been telling completely false stories to of us. He sees firsthand that nothing is that way at home, except that my mom leaves every Friday to party with the funds raised and the money my father gives her for child support. Due to this, our home is a wreck. No running water, no food, and at times no lights. My sister's boyfriend eventually finds out that my mom is the woman who's been talking to his mom and telling her all these lies. He speaks to his mom, and his mom confronts my mom on the issue. She quits immediately and blamed everything on us somehow. She's the victim, of course. So it's simple. When you guys are old enough to fend for yourselves, no contact. Cut this mother off. It sucks. It's a hard thing to say out loud, but my goodness, you want to talk about addition by subtraction? Subtract her from your life, and you will add and reap all of the benefits of what a healthy life should be. Story 51. Waiting in the self-checkout line with the fam, behind an older guy with a limp, and this little girl, probably 12 or 13 years old, comes around the line to look at the candy beside the kiosk. As the next kiosk becomes available, she starts to walk towards it. So I told her, the line's back there. All of a sudden, a woman comes from behind everyone in line, loudly telling me that if I had a problem, I could talk to her. So that's what I calmly did. I told her it was obvious that she was trying to cut, and the woman got super pissed and acted like that wasn't true, all while cutting everyone else. She kept on, cussing and yelling, and I just kept telling her that she was mad because she got caught, without profanity. I even offered the guy that had been in front of me to use the open kiosk. Didn't want to be a hypocrite, which he declined. The funny thing is, my wife is typically really defensive with women whenever this kind of thing happens, but she held back until it was clear the woman wasn't going to stop. I'm pretty sure she wanted me to call her names or start cussing to really seem like she was the victim, but I just kept it cool to let her show her ass. My wife eventually cussed her out, at which point she finally stopped trying to escalate things. This whole ordeal still irritates me because this is obviously the way she teaches her kids to behave. She encourages them to sneak around people to cut in line, and then further legitimizes it by getting defensive because she got caught. Story 52. I played a game of 4th edition D&D with a GM that my brother had played with for a while, joining his Adventurers League game, which is required to follow the text of pre-written adventure paths. For a few weeks, I was in disbelief at how poorly balanced and confusing these official adventures were, especially because 4th was supposed to be easier to make fair but challenging encounters for. I complained about the balance and explained that I wasn't having fun playing as things were going. After a particularly bad session where we were overwhelmed by enemies and kidnapped, I was fed up. I checked the pre-written adventure to see just what the publisher, Wizards of the Coast, were thinking. Turns out, he was lying to all of us, and it changed not just that adventure, but all the adventures I'd participated in so much that they were way off script. He had added powers to some boss enemies, and in that particularly egregious session, he had added swarms more enemies to force us to lose after we'd handily beaten the encounter as written. Nothing in the script about being kidnapped, much less turned into goddamn vampires before regaining consciousness. When I confronted him with these facts, his response was to get angry at me for having gone and read the adventures. He demanded an apology, which I naturally outright refused. I quit playing, and I won't ever forgive that effer for making me miserable on purpose at his games, shrugging as though it was out of his hands when I complained, lying the entire time. So, I've never played D&D, so I don't understand how big of a deal it is. Commenters, can you please let me know, is this really something worth just totally losing your mind over and getting pissed and holding a grudge and thinking that your life is ruined because someone made your D&D quest harder? Like, is that a real thing? I'm not, like, turning my nose up on it or anything. I just want to know, like, how serious is this really? Is his anger justified? Let's hear it in the comments. Story 53. One night around 3 a.m., my girlfriend and I were woken up by a loud crash. Some drunk girl had crashed her car into the front steps of our apartment building. We all watched her get out of the car, so there was no question she was driving, and we called the cops, who arrived about 10 minutes later. During that 10 minutes, the girl was going around to all our neighbors acting shocked and asking people, "Whose car is this? Who did this?" Of course, everyone knew the car was hers, and she started getting mad at everyone when we all started calling her on her bullcrap. The cops show up and she tries to punch one of them, so they wrestle her to the ground and put her in cuffs. In the process, her wig falls off. One of the cops asks her what she wants him to do with it, and she tells him to throw it on her car seat. The doors of the car are locked, so he asks for the keys and she refuses with a long string of obscenities. While she's in the back of the police cruiser, a tow truck shows up and the cops are directing traffic while he hooks up her car. Before hitting out front steps, she drove over and destroyed a couple of bushes, which left thick stumps sticking out of the ground. A tow truck driver asks the cops for the keys so he can crank the steering wheel over to tow the car out around the bushes, but the cops say she refused to surrender them. The tow truck driver shrugs, goes back to his truck, and winches the car out right over the stumps, which rips off a good chunk of the car's exhaust and the car's front bumper. You can hear the girl screaming in the back of the squad car and kicking the door and stuff. It was hilarious. Even better is that the entire time the cops were waiting for the tow truck to finish, one of them was holding this girl's wig. Once the car was put on the bed of the tow truck and the driver started driving away, the cops looked at everyone, looked at the wig in his hand, and put it carefully on the top of a fire hydrant before getting in his car and driving away. The next morning, I saw a homeless man pushing a cart see the wig and put it on before continuing down the sidewalk. Story 54. My ex-girlfriend told other people about how I was SA'd at a party. I got together with her a few months after it happened to me, but I made it very clear I wasn't ready for anything sexual with her, and even more clear that I'm not ready for anyone to know. I told my dad, but he didn't believe me because I'm a man, so I assumed no one would. The only reason she knew about it was because I got blackout drunk one night with her and apparently let out everything that happened to her. Fast forward 4 months, and I came to the realization that I'm just not sexually interested in anything, and I want to break up. She was a very sexual person in nature, and I thought it was unfair on her to tie her down to someone that couldn't please her in that way. She takes it really, really bad and tells a bunch of people about what happened. I confronted her about telling people, and she tries to claim how knowing what happened to me became too much of a burden to carry, and she had to tell someone, even though someone was about 3 people. She played the victim card hard and even went as far as saying that I was selfish to tell her because she then had to carry my secret with her. The people she did tell never let me know who they were until after this, and they were nothing but supportive and have since distanced themselves from her. It's been a little while, and I feel much more comfortable talking about it, with the help of some truly amazing friends. But God, I cannot describe what I felt after hearing that she had told other people. I knew she would take it badly, but I never thought she would sink so low to hurt me in that way. One of the people she told had a long talk with me after everything and described it as, quote, she just wanted to punish you for breaking up with her. Nothing more, nothing less. If anyone has been through the same thing, just know that it gets better. Trust me. If you're a guy or a girl, there will be people you can talk to about it. Talking about it is the first step to forever. Story 55. My aunt. It's always about her and poor, pitiful me. The 2 most popular stories to stand out, though. Got pregnant on accident with a guy who was loaded. He wanted her to sign a prenup before they got married, and she refused. Whatever. They end up breaking up when she discovers he's cheating on her. She started effing him while he was with someone else, so it wasn't a stretch. So anyway, bitter custody battle over my cousin ensues. My cousin has downs, by the way. My aunt wanted full custody even though she defaulted on a car loan and student loans, and my mama ended up taking a mortgage out on 2 of the homes she owned. Family isn't rich, We have two houses they used to own back in the 50s that they rented out because they were paid off, and then the one she currently lived in. So X takes her to court and they get 50-50 with him getting domiciliary. On the weeks my aunt had my cousin, she'd leave her, between the ages of about 2 to 6 years old, with my mama, who had Parkinson's and could barely care for herself, let alone a child with or without a disability. Or, because the bar she went to was also a restaurant, she'd bring my cousin with her and they'd literally stay there all night. Once cousin was falling asleep, she'd bring her home and go back. Her ex wasn't stupid and would call my mama's house all the time to talk to my aunt, so we all had to lie about her being in the bathroom or whatever so she couldn't come to the phone. On the week she did not have cousin, she would spend all her time at the bar crying how she missed her child. Everyone kept trying to tell her that on the week she has her, she should try to actually spend time with her instead of being at the bar. Nope. So eventually she sues for full custody and won. My aunt could not believe it at all. She thought for sure she'd win custody. It was only because the dad was friends with the judge in the small town. Had absolutely nothing to do with her being an alcoholic who took her kid with her to the bar or left her with an old woman who could barely walk. Second story. She was a teacher. She didn't graduate until she was over 40, and then in the last 15 or so years since she graduated, has taught for a whopping 5 years on and off because she's always getting hurt. That's why she was let go this most recent time. This had nothing to do with her constant public Facebook posts with her racism. At one point, one of her black students messaged her regarding one of her posts about Colin K not standing for the flag. My aunt posted her reply publicly, basically saying she isn't racist, but black people, blah blah blah. I don't honestly recall, but it was racist as F. So other colleagues began trying to discuss it with her in an attempt to get her to kind of take it back or rephrase it and help her save her job. She doubled down with one of the black teachers who replied, a very well thought out reply, no bashing, very educated post, and started saying she doesn't have a problem with black children, but she was so glad she didn't teach thugs like her boys. This woman's profile picture was her husband, and 2 sons, all dressed well, and their profile listed all of her and her kids' accomplishments. They weren't thugs at all. My aunt's replies got worse and worse, hurling insults at anyone who dared speak against her. From what I heard, several teachers and concerned people took screenshots of the entire thing, as well as other crap she had posted, and suddenly she didn't have a job. It's because she was white and they didn't want to fire her, but they had to because the people who reported her behavior were all black, and so because of affirmative action, the school board had no choice. Except I know of at least 3 people, including myself, who also sent the SS to the school board. She was an awful person to have as a teacher, racist as hell, and could only get jobs in lower income schools, so most of her students were black, and she'd make fun of these kids and their names non-stop. It was disgusting. Now she tells people it's because she's disabled with back problems, but when she's around family, she goes on and on about how black people got her fired and she did nothing wrong. Story 56. This is currently happening and makes me so mad. My brother and his girlfriend were together for about 2 years. Has a little bit of a rough patch and moved on. They decided to move a state away from us. I guess her dad lives there. Everything is quiet for a few months. Then I'm scrolling on Facebook one day and I see my brother post some relationship BS post. And the girl comments about, so we're not going to talk about how you hit me over the head with a liquor bottle and broke my window? And he says like, LOL, I told you I went to sleep and didn't remember I did it. Leave it be. So I reach out to the girl like, WTF is happening over there? Turns out they were having another rough patch and he broke into her room through the window, busted her TV, hit her with a bottle, beat her, and then SA'd her before passing out. She's currently staying with Dad. Brother's in the hospital from hurting himself, so he couldn't go to jail. So I spent the night just sort of validating her existence and letting her know my brother is a scumbag, report him, get a restraining order, a SA kit, the whole ordeal. She let me know during this talk that he's been abusing her the whole 2 years. It's been about a week, and my brother just marked on Facebook that he moved back to our state. I let girlfriend know he's gone, and she tells me, yeah, sucks for him, because when I go to court next week, they're going to put a warrant out for him, and he's going to get time for leaving the state. Meanwhile, the last few days, brother's been posting all over Facebook, from relationship and love pages, all that stuff about a real woman sticks by your side through all your troubles, or ride or die, or I've lived, I've lost everything, and all that whiny BS. It's just like, F you, dude. This poor girl is not responsible for you being a psychopath. Debating driving over there and beating the crap out of him, but that won't really solve anything. Really thought he was better than that. Story 57. My mom brought my son around her physically, emotionally, and verbally abusive ex without my consent because she lives her entire life under the mantra, "It's easier to be forgiven than it is to get permission." When we found out, we were upset. She acted hardcore offended that we would have the audacity to be mad at her. That was in February. My son is the love of her life, and her eye roll here, but because we won't let him around her friend, she's not reached out to my son at all. He broke his arm last year. She knew about it and never once called to see how he was. She missed his preschool graduation. I had specifically made sure she knew the details too, because he wanted her there because she was hurt and embarrassed. I wouldn't let her pick him up from school to spend the day with her friend and her. He had his first day of kindergarten this week, and she hasn't called to ask about him at all. He's slowly forgetting she exists. We've seen her once this entire summer, and it was because we went to her. I feel bad for him, but I'm glad he's young enough that he won't really remember how awesome she can be when you 100% comply with her wants. She could have asked for him to go to the park or to the zoo, or asked us to meet up for dinner at any point this summer, but because I've said if her friend is at her house, then my son can't be, she just doesn't want to be in our lives. I'm pregnant, almost done, and I don't even know if she realizes it. She doesn't acknowledge this baby at all, and I think it's because she knows she won't be a part of its life on her terms, so why bother? I'll make my own mistakes as a mother, sure, but I will die a horrible death before I ever make hers and treat my kids like pawns the way she treats me and my brothers. So I'm sure that there's more to the story here, but it just, I don't know, it seems a little contradictory that she is setting these boundaries, basically trying to force her mother's hand and say, like, if you want to see your grandkid, you basically have to break up with your partner. That's not really a fair ultimatum to give. If you don't like this guy and you don't want your child around them, that's fine. But when you set that boundary, you can't then turn around and be upset that your mom doesn't comply with that and chooses to be with whoever she wants to be with, and then complain that she doesn't call and check in on the grandson when you're the one kind of drawing the line in the sand. So I see both sides of it, but it's like, don't try to gaslight and play the victim. You know, in this case, honestly, I feel like OP is playing the victim more so than the mother, but that's just me. Let's move on. Story 58. My friend started talking to this guy who lives in another city 6 hours away on a dating app. She fell for him fast, within a week, saying stuff like he's perfect, agrees when he jokes about being her future husband, etc. I told her she's moving way too fast, but she reassures me by saying they talk a lot so they know each other well, which I told her I disagreed with. 3 weeks roll by. She decides to meet him for a first date at a midway point. She paid for the Airbnb entirely and never brought it up while they spent time together. She also offered to pay, which he said she doesn't have to do and they can split it, but she insisted, so let her afterwards. The next day, she changed the plan and stayed a bit longer and went to brunch with him. He paid for coffees in 2 days and offered to pay brunch, but she insisted instead. She also gave him 2 of her shirts in her own volition so he can remember her after this date. Now, some context, which she was aware of. This guy's friend passed away 1 day before the date, and his funeral was 2 days after the date. He didn't text her the day after the date, and she texted him blocks asking why he's not responding and hasn't paid her back. He told her he's going through stuff since the funeral has some family troubles. She continues to text him, blocks every days, and he'd reply curt messages. After 1.5 weeks, he stopped replying. Fair enough, because my friend kept asking him for the money back 2 days after the date. She now says the guy stole from her, that he stole her money and the shirts, and complains she doesn't understand why she has such bad luck with men. Story 59. My younger brother's ex fits the bill. For this story, there's a great detail of context needed. Back in 2016, my younger brother, T, started dating his ex. Instantly, he was smitten. Of course, she had her own baggage. She had an 8-year-old daughter. T embraced her as his own within the first year. My niece's biological father wasn't in the picture. Her mother described him as a deadbeat dad, and we believed her. A year into the relationship, he moved in with her. 2 years in, she was pregnant with their baby boy, and in November, she gave birth to him. T loved them with all his soul. He worked hard so they were comfortable and would want for nothing. They moved 3 times between 2016 and 2019. The final move, my cousin purchased a house for him to rent to own. even though his credit wasn't the greatest. T gave control of their finances to his ex while he earned the majority of the income. In 2019, they had 2 housemates renting out the basement because he had broken his hand and had been laid off months prior. At some point, she had started working in a neighboring city in order to have additional income. Then T started noticing discrepancies. She would go out for interviews at new prospective jobs at odd times, once going to a law office for an entry-level data entry position interview after business hours. One night, he found nudes on her phone. Nudes not belonging to him. He also got the mail one day to find overdue bills on the utilities. They were months behind, even though between the 2 roommates and himself going back to work, he had given her enough to cover all the bills. Bills which she claimed to be up to date on. In the year they lived in their house, she had not once paid a full month's rent to my cousin. Between the 2 roommates, she was receiving $200 more than the rent payments alone. She had left him thousands of dollars in debt. Those jobs she had, those interviews she went to, all of them were rendezvous with men she met on dating websites. It finally came to a head when he confronted her about cheating on him. She admitted to it, claiming she needed more. More attention, more money, more love. He told her to move out. She did, leaving the children with him. In under 3 days, she had moved in with another man on the other side of the state. Later that week, that same man kicked her out. She lived with 3 different men in that first month she was away. My brother, before agreeing to relinquish the children into her care, asked for 50-50 custody. All he wanted was her to sign the promissory note, and he'd agree to go as far as to transport them to and from her, across the state. She refused. Over the phone, she threatened to kill him, to burn the house down with him inside, calling him all manner of names. Ultimately, she agreed to the 50-50 custody over the phone, and on a day in April, she was to pick up the kids and sign the note. On the day of, my father had been parked in the driveway. My nephew buckled in the back seat. His ex's mother asked my father if he could roll down the window so that she might be able to kiss her grandson. My father rolled down the window halfway. This is where his ex went insane. She reached into the back seat through the window and unbuckled the child, then proceeded to yank the boy through the window. My nephew was too big to fit through the opening and was screaming as she pulled on his arms, banging his head on the roof of the Jeep. My brother ran around the car to separate them, and as he was restraining her, a policeman pulled up. My dad, once they were clear, backed the Jeep up 15 feet, 6 feet onto the road, in order to close the window and secure the child. The police only saw my brother pulling both his ex and her mother away from the window, ultimately knocking them over onto the ground. My brother was arrested for assault. They also arrested my father. You see, he was pulled back onto a public street. My nephew unbuckled and crying in the vehicle. My father was charged with felony child endangerment. She then took her time going through the house and taking everything they could fit into the car with them and drove back across the state, vowing to do everything in her power to see him prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. On social media, she bashed him, saying he was verbally and physically abusive, that he had beat her up in the front lawn while her children watched. She played it up on Facebook, and her friends believed it. Well, those who didn't know my brother. She took my brother's children, and it broke him. Those kids were his life. He'd read to them every night, spend time with them every day. Suddenly, that house went from happy, warm, and bright to empty, dark, and lifeless. In May of this year, my younger brother took his own life, 1.5 months after she took his kids and shattered his life. I blame her, I truly do. Yet, for the sake of my parents, I dare not say it aloud. My brother had no money left, no property outside of furniture and a car with an outstanding balance on a loan. I was forced to walk through that house, the place where my baby brother took his own life, and sort through what was left. Now, she sends my nephew and niece to my parents for weeks at a time while she spends my brother's Social Security payments, meant for his son, on trips to Florida with her ex. I want nothing less than my niece and nephew's happiness, but want nothing to do with that woman they call mom. I just want my baby brother back. Story 60. Okay, here we go. I had to drive my ex-boyfriend and his current boyfriend to the beach. I didn't want to drive them, but it was for a friend's going away party, and if I didn't drive, they didn't go, so I bit the bullet. I asked him the night before and the day of not to be touchy in the car because it would make me uncomfortable and I'd be unable to remove myself from the situation because I would be driving. He agreed, but he lied. The whole car ride, they were holding hands and muttering "I love you" to each other just loud enough so I could hear it. I bit the bullet and kept going. Once we got to the beach, they sat far enough away where I could still see them in my peripheral vision, but still far enough away to claim ignorance. They were in each other's mouths the entire day. I took several walks to clear my head, and I held my tongue. I would see him look at me to make sure I was looking in his particular direction so he could kiss his new rebound boyfriend so he could cause me the most pain possible. Afterwards, we went to dinner at a place a few blocks away. He saw me not eating and looking awful at dinner. He texted me and checked on me, but he knew exactly what was wrong. He just wanted to seem like the good guy. I said what was wrong. His public displays of affection really hurt me. I asked him to maybe stop being so touchy, but it's his life and his relationship. He said he understood and would tone it down regardless. Roughly a minute later, I head to the bathroom to vomit for the second time during dinner. I slipped away so as not to make a scene, because it hurt so badly seeing the boy I once called my honeybee, it's a dumb name we had for each other, make out with someone else only a few months after we broke up, 4 to be exact. Anyways, I come back from the bathroom not a minute later to see them making out. I sit down and try to get it out of my head. It went on for another 30 seconds and I realized he's not limiting it. He's lied to me. So I said 3 words. Thanks for that, in a very angry tone. Not raising my voice, but obviously angry. He knows me as a passive guy, so this was very out of character for me. He was stunned and couldn't react, so he just ran out of the restaurant crying to make as much of a scene as possible. When asked what happened, he said I just went off on him and didn't ask him to tone it down at all. So my friends thought I went off on him for no reason. He lied to my friends and knowingly hurt me all day to get back at me. F you, B. Story 61. The autism/disabled kid warrior mom community. Whinging that they don't know what's wrong when their kid has an all-day meltdown after dragging it to an event of screaming sound and lights for hours. Whining when their kid head-bashed and smears crap everywhere. I hate autism. I hate my kid. My life is too hard. Hun, no kid does that for fun. It's always a sign of high stress. Usually abuse. Paragraphs and paragraphs of this parent describing literally abusing their kid, enough for CPS to be called, then blames the kid when it has the obvious reaction and blasts it all over autism support groups or their own blog for attention. Cries about the time they attempted self-unaliving, dragging their kid with them, but then stopping only when they realize they're going to kill their NT kid as well. Yes, someone literally did that in a video for Autism Speaks. And when you call them out for being in no state to raise children and suggest that if it's so hard and they hate it so much, maybe try respite care or even put them in foster care/adoption. But I'm the only one who can care for them. Like they're the only person who's ever raised a disabled kid before. I've seen single mothers raise disabled kids in worse conditions and they're doing far better and whinging less. Also, the autism mom label itself. They make the kid's disability all about me, 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 me. They base their entire identity off of their kid's disabilities. Again, to grab attention and be a professional victim whenever they can. Story 62. My ex cheated on me. She was a horrible, abusive person who told me all the details of how when she effed other men, it was way better than me, and how I'm a pathetic loser who studies a not manly major. I studied cinema and communication, instead of a manly major like finance and business. She shamed my body, shamed the way I think, shamed the friends I hung out with, shamed my poor family, and yet she wasn't rich, but I guess rich dude is a turn-on, etc. When I finally had the courage to break up with her after she completely ruined my self-esteem, she started crying and calling me 10 times a day about how she wanted to go back with me. Then tells me how I'm a pathetic a-hole who will end up in the street with my artsy, poor, not manly project. How she will be married to a rich and manly dude and how they will laugh at my poor ass later. It took me months to get over her. Months of not sleeping and not eating a lot. I completely cut off contact with her, but yet she still wanted to show off by creating new Facebook accounts to tell me how she is effing rich and hotter guys. I never insulted her or talked back because I believe in respect. 1 year later, I heard through a friend we have in common that I'm the biggest a-hole ever and that I cheated on her. I will never cheat on anyone in my life, and how she's a victim of me, how I destroyed her life and how she was miserable because of me, how I'm the worst guy ever. I'm doing way better now. Story 63. After my high school graduation, I left the venue in my car and got on the freeway. Lots of traffic from mine leaving and the next starting. I was in my lane and traffic was stopped and go up to 30 miles per hour. I was going about 30 at the time, just smoothly moving when I get rear-ended very hard by a red Mustang. I'm 6 foot and drive a Prius, so my seat is all the way back, and it was hard enough to somehow hit my face on the steering wheel, getting a small cut. My friend in the car with me cracked a plastic part of my dash with her knee. I'm pissed. We pull over and I see it's a 3-car wreck and this small gray car was behind the Mustang. We got out and make sure we're all okay, and police nearby helping traffic came over. Everyone I graduated with passed us and we had to give them the thumbs up we were fine. Anyways, the 3 drivers get talking and the girl in the gray car, the one that hit the red Mustang, insists she got hit. We all walk around to the back of her car and no dents or nothing. Police come, check papers, and get a report down. Thank God he didn't buy her BS lie and gave her a ticket. In my state, the police don't say who causes it, but rather say she failed to control her car and gets a ticket. The whole time with insurance, it was a mess. Her insurance fought, saying she wasn't at fault, and her record was she got hit by a car that left the scene. This went on for about a month, and it didn't help. Her insurance is a rather small-named company. The officer cannot say who's at fault, and they used that. Took a month for them to agree to fix my car. My whole rear bumper was messed up. Rear exhaust, trunk, which was a pain since a Prius has a cargo-type trunk, and some other minor stuff. Lost my car for 1 month because this girl lied, saying she was hit and didn't want to admit she couldn't control her car. Story 64. In 6th grade, my ex-best friend leaked my number to these girls who bullied me in the 5th grade. When I asked her who did it, she said she didn't know anything. So I went to hang out with her a few days later. When she went to the bathroom, I opened her phone and found out she was the girl who leaked my number. I left her house immediately and made up a dumb excuse to leave. When I got to school the next day, I confronted her. She got mad at me and started spreading rumors about me. Then, when I was in art class a week later, one of the girl's friends told me I had to go see the school therapist. You need parental permission or a school recommendation to see the therapist. I told her I wasn't going, and the friend kept pressuring me until the teacher got a call from the therapist asking for me and the girl's friend. I got to the therapist's room, and the girl, the bully, and the friend were in there. The girl was crying, and the other 2 girls were comforting her. The therapist gave me a dirty look and told me to sit down. The girl had this sob story about how I leaked an explicit photo of her and gave everyone her phone number and address. Then the bully and a friend had evidence. The therapist got the police involved, and they went through everyone's phones, and the girl got into a lot of legal trouble. She got fined about $1,000 for something about lying about explicit pictures of a minor. And I got off with the story about karma being a big fat slap in the face. Story 65. My cousin is a horrible parent and never even wanted her child. An adorable 2-year-old going on 3 boy. She did nothing but scream at him, and one weekend I was house sitting for my parents. She lived upstairs with her son, and my mom told me flat out, don't let her bring anyone in the house. Sounds like something you would have to tell a babysitter watching a teen, right? But no, she's older than me, and I'll be 30 on September 25th. I got woken up at 2:30 a.m. by her trying to sneak her boyfriend, a druggie who we believe is also a predator, who had only gotten out of prison a few months, if not weeks before, upstairs with a sleeping 2-year-old. I was angry anyway, but then she says he was cold, so I told him to come in. I say no, he has to leave, and she throws a fit and stays in the car with him until sunrise. And by the way, even if I wasn't told not to let her bring anyone in, I would have kicked him out anyway. I don't trust her or her friends, and there's a 2-year-old upstairs. It's sad I was the only adult in the house and she's older than me. Also, my dad has a mid-sized shepherd mix. He's not aggressive and has never had a guard dog training. My dad just got him because he wanted a camping dog. But she does not like strangers, so trying to bring someone you know isn't welcome around here in the house at 2:30 a.m., well, everyone is sleeping when there's a shepherd in the house that may or may not try to bite was dumb anyway. Anyway, she calls my mom the next day crying about how I was treating her like a child, and my mom says, "Who do you think told him not to let you bring your boyfriend in my house?" She stayed away the rest of the day while my grandma watched her son. And when my mom got home, told me the she-beast tried calling her that her boyfriend had an eye infection and she was trying to clean his eye out. I wouldn't let her explain. First of all, you said he was cold, not that he had an eye infection. Second, even if you did say he had an eye infection, I would have told you to get him to an ER, not my parents' house at 2:30 a.m., so he can infect me and the 2-year-old. Total lack of accountability. It was a shock to no one when she lost custody of her son. And by the way, she still refuses to admit she has no business raising a child. Story 66. Definitely not the worst case where I've been framed by someone acting all innocent, but one that still sticks to me and one that I can't forgive. When I moved to a new city, I had a pretty hard time finding new friends, mostly because of how I was. Overweight nerd who learns language in her free time. It took me a while, but I befriended 2 girls. C, the older one, and M, who got bullied a lot at school, and I decided to protect them. The younger girl, M, was sort of an overweight, goth-looking, into anime and all stuff dark and magic nerd. Whenever someone made fun of her drawing black runes on her arm or her face, I was there to cheer her up and took the beating instead of them beating her up. She was younger and seemed more depressed, so I felt responsible, especially after I've seen the way her family was and the countless strangers she wanted to hang out with. Creepy men and women in dark places, goth tattoo studio in my city. The other friend that got bullied introduced me to a man that she thought would be a good boyfriend because he lost his fiancée and unborn daughter a while ago and still suffered, and I would be good to cheer him up. I was 15, he was 25. So we met on a Friday and just played video games. We kissed and that was it. Of course, I told my friend, M, about him, and she suddenly got interested. She didn't want to come because she knew I didn't like parties, so she assumed a party with me there wouldn't be good anyway. Next day, we met again at Friends' C house. Everything went the same as the day before. Video games, snacks, I had Coke while they had alcohol. I have a family history of alcohol abuse, so I definitely didn't want to try any. But the later it got, the more my friends tried to get me to at least try some. Man handed me a glass of something called apple vodka cocktail. My friend, C, kept watching me while drinking it, and whenever I finished it, she handed him the bottle so he would pour me some more. Of course I said no, but after a while I got kinda dizzy, and the rest was just blur and mess. I still remember how my mom picked me up and how I felt weird for the next few days. Constant headaches and all that. At school, my two friends kept asking me how my alone time with the man went, and I had no idea what they were talking about. Took me a while to understand that his cocktail wasn't only apple-flavored vodka, but also some sort of drug he got from my friend's boyfriend. I got angry at them and hurt over what had happened, but got told I was only overreacting. I kept silent over what had happened because I didn't want to lose the only people that made school survivable, but kept thinking back to what had happened. So my friend, M, kept getting mad over me getting sad and thought it was funny that I stopped being in contact with the man I met, because my mom threatened to put me into a mental hospital if I didn't stop. She didn't know about the drugs. That's when my friend's victim card came out. Whenever she saw me upset, she whined how I'm ruining her fun and how it wasn't even that bad, how I should have enjoyed it. On my last day being friends with her, the day I decided I won't befriend people that make me feel uncomfortable anymore, she walked up to me before class, seemed excited, and showed me a red spot on her neck that looked like a hickey. After 5 minutes of her being overly excited with how she was now dating the man that had drugged and SA'd me a few months before that, I slapped her in front of everyone. She later said I hit her because I was jealous nobody loved me. Teachers got upset at me for being violent, and the only way to prevent my mom from finding out was promising my teacher it was a one-time thing. People who saw me slap her suddenly stopped bullying her, but found me as their new victim. Formatting and grammar might be bad. Typing this on my phone at 2 a.m. and English isn't my first language.